Awesome.
So I don't know if Chad's coming or not.
He's not going to make it.
He's not going to make it out. It is 5:30, so instead of waiting, let's start with technology, if you would, Ron.
Okay, I would like to open the technology committee meeting, and I will turn it over to Mr. Hill.
Hello, I'm gonna stay back here because I'm doing the streaming today as well, so, for technology, this will be quick. The only thing I have on the agenda today is the 2024-25 technology lease. Every year we do a technology lease, that's what pays for our Chromebooks, projectors. That is built into the technology budget on a yearly basis. And the only difference with the lease this year is that we're going with a different company called American Capital. In the past, we always used Cal First, but we had quotes from 3 different lenders, and the American Capital came in with the best price. And they also are a member of ASBO, which is a group that we belong to for our, I know Sherry, Mrs. Malatoris is involved with the local version of ASBO. So we are going to use American Capital, and it's It's a 3-year, $50,000 a year lease, so it's a total of $150,000. And we paid over $50,000 for a 3-year period. And there you can see the details of the lease. So again, that's included in our technology budget, and that pays for Chromebooks, projectors, and accessories. So does anybody have any questions about that? If no questions, I would like permission then to put that on the board agenda. And this would go on the board agenda typically when the budget's approved. So this would be on the agenda when the budget would be approved. Is everybody okay with moving that forward to the agenda? Yeah. Okay. That's all I have for today.
You took almost 3 minutes. I don't know.
Maybe we set this up. Thank you.
Give me time, I get it
Now, you got the challenge now.
Like to call the building and grounds together, and I will turn it over to Chris.
So we finally got back some numbers for the new sound system for the auditorium. When Eric's ready, he'll put it up on the
I'll
board
put it up.
for
I'm
me.
sorry, that's me. I'm trying to do attendance here.
Oh, so it's back. So the proposal we came up with and we agreed on going forward with is for Keystone Fire and Security. It's for a total price of $51,043. This is to do a total, they do everything for us. We don't have anything to do with them. The other contracts we were looking at, maintenance would have to run some of the wire. Being how high the auditorium roof is, and there's really no access above there, I didn't feel safe having my guys do it. This is what they do. This is a professional company. So that's primarily why we chose that.
Was this going to be split with the theater program for this part, or was it all of the district?
So right now, this would be through the district, just because of the timeliness of it. If you recall, the foundation paid for half of the microphones
Okay, it was the microphone.
twice.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it. I knew there was something.
Now, they are interested in, they're working to get a capital campaign up and off the ground. We actually have a meeting on the 24th about that. But then to see also the outcome of the feasibility study, to see if there's anything there they can partner for either, physical upgrades or programs. So, I don't know, did I capture all that?
Pretty well.
Pretty well? Yeah. Yep.
So then if there's not any questions,
So, go ahead, Mrs. Mulder.
So this is one of the items you're going to see when we go through the finance budget agenda. When the board asked us last week, is there any other items, our last meeting, is there any other items we might be considering or that we need to look at? This is one of those items that that's going to be on that slide that you'll see shortly at the budget presentation.
So we will be asking for direction on this in a short bit.
Okay.
Yep.
so then along with the sound system, when we had a survey come in and to see what was wrong and what we could do to upgrade our auditorium, one of them was the echo. There's a lot of echo. I guess if anyone was at the plays recently, if you're close to the wall, you can hear that echo. So one of the suggestions was to get sound dampening panels. So Mr. Haas went and actually found panels. So for 32 panels, which they'd be 2 foot by 4 foot, and they'd actually be at ear level to prevent that echo off the wall. So we need roughly 32 of them, one at each level to kind of make it cosmetic as well. Instead of having larger panels, you wouldn't have that step down as if the chairs. So this way it would look cosmetically better. They come in multiple colors. So for 32 panels, we're looking at $2,238.40. So that's another one that we're looking to the board for approval if we want to move forward with that.
Is that 2,000 per panel? or
No,
is
that's
that
total.
Wow.
Yeah,
All
for
32
32 panels, yes.
That's a big question.
And Chris's gentlemen are going to be
Yep, we're gonna
installing
install
them.
them.
So
Yep.
that's just the cost of the materials, that's it.
Yeah.
Two.
Yeah.
So that is rolled into the cost of the, when you see that slide, all
All
of
of
the
it.
sounding, that includes all of that, is on that slide presentation.
And then again, along with that, they need new controller for the new sound system, so that's where the iPad and the Bluetooth comes in for the $500. So that's all in one.
So I'll just put a note here that this is gonna be discussed as part of the budget presentation.
So that's coming out of next year's budget, is that what we're talking about instead of this year's? Okay.
So then along with that, the rigging in the high school needs to be repaired. So we're more or less just looking for direction. They do have one rigging right now that works, but to have a full system, we'd have to have someone come out and actually give us quotes. The last quote I got was from the company that came in to try and repair the system that we have. They came in at $150,000 to $200,000.
To
For a
repair or
whole
replace?
system.
Replace?
The system we have in now is outdated. The company that installed it is no longer in business.
Okay.
So it would either be the one rigging we have now or a complete system. They can't even come in and give us two pieces of rigging because it won't match up with the one that we have. So unfortunately, it would have to be either the one or it's a whole overhaul. Since our old system was installed, it's much more advanced now. I feel that the system that they would install would be a lot better than what we had.
Right.
How old is the current system that we have?
I'm not sure.
I think it was installed the year I started here,
Right.
the fall of that year, which would have been 2017, I believe.
Yeah.
And we've had issues with it ever since. Yeah.
Do they give any like length of how long it should last?
Our old system?
The new
The
one
new
that you're
system, no.
looking at? Okay.
No. All I know is the old system was a multi-cable, multi-brake system. They don't use that anymore. They use a one motor, one brake. So the whole system moves a little faster, smoother, and there's only one emergency brake where the old system had multiple, and that's what happened. So if one brake feels that it's moving too fast, it locks up. It leaves the other four to continue moving, and if you're not quick on that button, what happens is the cable ends up tightening around the pulley, and then it embeds in the pulley, which is what happened, and it's shot because it's
Okay.
plastic.
All right.
Yeah, unfortunately, but
So again, all those items related to the rigging and the sound system it's integrated into the budget presentation.
okay. So the next one is NLYAA field hockey. Was kind of looking for direction. They had called me. They want to get food trucks for one of their tournaments, which is over the summer. So what happens is multiple teams show up, lots of parents. They wanted to have food trucks instead of opening a food stand somewhere and having someone volunteer to do it. We talked about it at Cabinet. There was multiple rules, I guess you could say, that we wanted. The food trucks would have to supply their own electric, supply their own water, and pretty much have their own garbage, or NLYA would have to then dispose of their own garbage. They would have to park behind the middle school and not on the grass. So I'm looking to the board if everyone's okay with that, or if there's a set of rules or something that you would want to add.
Do they pay us kind of like a royalty to do that, or not in this case? No.
Well, I'm going to say no, only because it's NOYA.
So they would get it if, you know.
Yes.
And that's okay. I mean, I know sometimes like Vince's Cheesesteaks will come and they'll give like $1 a cheesesteak or something to the swimming pool or whatever, you know, and I didn't know if they did that or not, but.
I don't know of anything in the policy. We had looked in the policy.
No, so the policy says that we can not charge a local program like NLYAA, which I fully agree with. it's silent on whether they can make money off of, revenue from food providers. Honestly, I am not opposed to this. I think it's a way to help one of our partner organizations in the community. It's not costing us any money to host NLYAA because they're not using our buildings or anything. It's all outside. So if they do something that's going to raise money to help their program, which ultimately is a feeder for our programs, I'm okay with that. I just want to make sure that this committee was also okay with that.
It doesn't set precedents for, could this get out of hand? That's what I'm asking.
Ultimately, we would bring it back here to this committee each time, and there's nothing that's precedent setting in
So it
this.
won't get out of hand.
Right.
Like limiting how many food trucks are there, you mean? Like,
Well, whatever, yeah.
per event?
Or like if every group now wants to have food
Right,
trucks.
food trucks. I mean, and my only concern would just be, like them leaving the grounds a mess or anything.
Right, well, and
you know,
that
like,
was
that's
what we had said,
just to
yeah.
keep an eye on that,
Yep.
Is this a one-day event, 2-day event, 3-day event?
I believe it's a weekend, so it's Saturday and a
Oh,
Sunday.
Saturday,
Yeah.
Sunday, okay. Are the trucks then gonna stay there, or will they leave?
No, they would be, if they would return the next day, they would,
Oh.
yep, they would have to leave at night and come
I
back
like
the next day.
oh.
As long as they clean up their mess.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
I think it's a nice thing to do.
Mr. Mann, can you just confirm that they're leaving that night? That's a question I never
Yeah.
thought of when we talked about it.
I didn't know if they're gonna just park their truck there and then
Yeah.
leave.
Is there any insurance requirements that
I
they
was
need to
gonna
have to ask for that?
I was just gonna say, I would make sure that they have, just like if they're renting our facilities or anything like
Right.
that, they have to have insurance. I would make sure the food company has
Right.
insurance,
So-
not NLYA's
Well,
insurance.
NLYA also, but
Right.
the food trucks as
Right.
well, that would be
Trucks
coming,
provide
that they're
insurance.
insured.
Correct.
At this time,
Additionally insured.
Right.
is also-
I had asked for names of food trucks, so they don't even have anyone lined up. So she actually, on Facebook, I don't know if anyone's a part of it, she actually asked for food trucks. So once she gets a number of food trucks, then she's gonna contact me with who's coming, what's coming, because that was part of it, who's gonna be here. Then we'll talk at cabinet to see, I'll get insurance from them, and that stuff.
How many were they looking for, do you know?
4 to 5. She was saying Rita's, a pretzel, cheesesteak, and maybe a hot dog stand, so somewhere in there.
That's not
Yeah.
fries.
They don't like coming when there's so many.
As long
Past
as they're
experience.
different,
Right, and
yeah.
that was her hope, that she could get
Yeah.
different
Right,
trucks.
right.
Yeah.
I would look at it as similar as what we do with our bonfire. We have a couple of food
Mm,
trucks
yeah.
that come
It's
to
like
that,
that, yeah.
and, they've always, our guys have cleaned up afterwards, but it's
Mhm.
been pretty respectful. Like, I haven't seen trash running around out there
Good.
or anything, so hopefully they'll honor that.
So is there anything else that we would need then? Make sure they're not overnight insurance. I'll add it on to what we had already asked them.
Yep.
Okay.
Do you know when it is? I'm sorry.
I don't offhand, I can look it up.
It's all right.
Look at once I'm done.
Okay.
So the,
I was
Just
gonna make
what's
sure
the
that I
order?
watch what food trucks are
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
And visit that weekend.
A cousin's Maine lobster would be
Right.
nice.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
So the last one I have is the school-owned vans. Originally, back in September, the board okayed us looking for Traverses, 9-passenger vehicles for the school to own to transport students. Again, we haven't found any Traverse. So we were looking to possibly upgrade to a 9-passenger van instead of the Traverse. We did do some numbers. I had Sean pull just this past year how many times we used a minivan or a school van to transport kids. So the debate club, what's so cool about manufacturing, those were all less than 9 students. The number he gave back to me was over $9,300. Now that was just for 8 students. If we would have the 2 vans, which we were talking about, so now, you're talking 16 students, so how many activity runs could we run on 2 vans instead of a bus. So I'm looking to the board to continue to try and find passenger vehicles. And we're hoping that that would come out of this year's budget yet. If we can get them, right.
And to expand the search beyond just traverses.
Right.
If it's like a, more of a traditional van, minivan, that you don't have to have the bus license to operate.
Correct.
Correct, it would keep it under, it could have to be a 10 passenger with one being the driver, nine passengers. You can't do more than 10 or it becomes a CDL.
And you don't need a special license for that?
Correct.
You do that.
Anything over 10, you need the special license for.
And it's considered a school bus or school vehicle. Or, I'm sorry, a school vehicle is 10 and less. A
Right.
school bus is 10 and more.
Is over 10.
Right.
Who would be the driver for those?
Usually the club advisor or a teacher or.
Does that go
coach.
against anything in their contract?
It does not. It says they're not allowed to use their own personal vehicles.
So there's nothing in their contract of if somebody, what if they say they don't want to?
When we would have to work around that.
And that's,
Either find another in-house
Yeah.
driver, they don't go, or consider paying Christ Transportation to do it.
and then on another note, for insurance purposes, are there any kind of steps we would need to take to have them as the driver?
Yeah, so like even when I rent vehicles, which I just rented for the track to go out to states, I send a copy of the people who are gonna be driving that car to our insurance company so that they have copies of their license and then they're insured under our insurance to be driving vehicles. Yeah.
Do we do any background driving checks on those?
We do not, which is something that if this happens, we will start to do.
And then how long does that last and how?
I think it's every year. I think
There's cost to that is all
Yes.
I'm trying to.
There- you are
there's
correct.
Management and cost to that.
Yep.
To do it. I'd be interested to see the actual numbers and the data, because if the van we're talking about would last 5 years, we could put all that in there and say, okay, it was $9,000 a year, 10,000, let's make it easy, because I can do math easy and tens, 10,000 a year, we're gonna keep that van for 5 years. So, okay, now it's $50,000. Now if we're buying, and I'm not saying we are, an $80,000 van, then it's not cost effective, right? When we look at that. But what does that number look like, and what is that, to really kind of look at the data to see, okay, well, how much is a driver's license check? How much is it gonna cost administration wise to follow that? What does that look like? Because now the gas, which is here, but the gas comes here. All of that starts to add up after a while. And I like the idea, don't get me wrong. But I think we're just making a decision off the cuff without seeing the data. So I'd like a little bit more, personally, I'd like a little bit more, but I think to go out and find something and bring that back, I'd be okay with that.
Right. So yes, we can do that. I will say the data is suppressed, right? It's naturally suppressed. It's not going to be a true read because this has never been an option. Right, so we don't know how many requests we're not receiving.
But we would know how many requests we would have taken an activity bus for.
Right, and
Yes,
that's,
And
which
you would know-
which we have, but what I'm saying is that may not be a true read because we have some activities that probably are just not, the requests just aren't coming in. Here's an example of that. I shared out last week that the crochet club went to the
Forgotten felines.
pause. Forgotten felines and finos.
Yes.
You know, so that is, typically those clubs do their own fundraising, they didn't have that yet in their savings. And it was not something where it would be a full van. And it would have been very expensive to add in a Saturday run to bring a driver in to do those kids. Those parents did that. So that would have been another example of, you know, just the requests aren't being processed. But the ones that we have record of, we can do. We can get you that data. But I just caution you that that data may not be truly reflective of all the opportunities that we're missing to do something.
So we believe, from what I'm hearing, we believe our students are missing opportunities because we don't have this. Is that what we're saying? That they're actually not doing something, which is a different conversation, because then how do we How do we get down to that level with it? Like, I'm afraid they're just not doing it, and then.
I'm afraid that we're missing some opportunities to take small groups to activities because we do not have this flexibility to do it in-house.
Can you do a survey?
No.
Would this allow for like more field trips and stuff?
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear.
Would this allow for more field trips to occur in the district, like
Small
smaller
groups,
ones? Because I feel like
groups.
we don't do enough of them.
So another example is some of our we took 6 high school students, a teacher, and an administrator over to the Changemaker Hub. So we had to pay a driver to do that. That's something that we could have done it in-house in one of these vehicles, and we wouldn't have had to pay a driver that was over at the steel stacks. That case, for that, we thought that was a very worthwhile opportunity for those student leaders to go over and engage in that. So we paid for it through Price Transportation to bring a driver in. She drove over. She sat there for the day. We weren't paying her to sit there, but then she drove back.
The track and field where she had to take 2 vehicles,
Right.
rent 2 vehicles, that's, we would have
Which
had a
was
van, yeah.
a little over $1,000 to rent 2 vehicles for 3
So
days.
when you're talking about expanding your searching and looking for, I mean, we're going with 50,000 was the Traverse car around?
In September, it was 40, I believe.
Okay, so I mean,
so
are we
now-
looking to go like, up to 260? Like, I mean, are we looking at a kind of a limit as to what you're?
That's a limit, that's
Yeah,
what I'm
I mean,
asking.
I
the board for. Do
again,
you
like
wanna
she's
set
saying
a limit?
80,000, I'm like, kind of like, yeah,
No, I
that's
think
a
80's
lot.
Yeah, so I talked to Parkland because they have some buses on these type vans on reserve with Fredericks. They were 56,000
Okay.
and she has, I think, 4 or 5 on order right now. But currently the price that she had when she bought them was 56,000. So I would not expect them to go to 80,000 in, in like 4 months' time.
Right.
I would suspect the longevity would only be 5 years either.
I agree. I would say probably more like 10 years.
Yeah.
Should be.
Easily
They should be.
because, yeah.
They should.
Yeah,
I mean, obviously, we have our own maintenance costs that we would have to take on and
right.
all that other stuff, but, I'm even looking at the wrestling program, hopefully we're turning the corner, we got more numbers. We haven't gone to regionals or states in the last 4 or 5 years. So,
Possibilities.
there's more possibilities. And I remember being on that side where we had to take a bus,
Yeah.
and how inconvenient it was. And I used my own personal car at times as well back then.
How are the numbers with the band and stuff? Because they often do traveling as well.
So our numbers up through middle school, I'm going to use the word that they are swelling.
Okay.
I just got a report from Mr. Carroll today, and I think we're like in the 70s.
Oh,
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Wow.
so they really do need the big
They,
buses. then,
they need a
so.
bigger bus, and just as an aside, a number of years ago when we had Mr. Carroll go down to the middle school, I said to you, I hope I come back to you with the problem of we have to hire another music teacher in a few years. I hope I come back to you, not for this budget cycle, the following budget cycle, and say we need another music teacher.
That's good to hear.
It's good to hear.
So I just want to remind everybody of that.
I think the bottom line to me is there's a lot of unanswered questions here. We don't know what the vans are costing, we're not sure of what happened. I think I need to see more numbers and then I can look at it statistically and say, yeah, that makes a whole lot of sense. Because I don't really know either. I'm hearing things that, I think you can add some of those things. We could have done this, could have done that, and we can come up with some structure and decide whether it's a good move or not, so.
And then
On the
I did
surface, it
hear.
sounds good, but.
Yeah, exactly. I did hear we wanted to try to get out of this year's budget.
Correct.
What's currently budgeted?
So again, it was what was determined back in what?
September.
September, whatever. We were putting like $47,000 for 2 of them, so like $90,000 was in the budget at that point in time. Now, we're looking at putting probably close to $800,000 back into fund balance this year, so there is extra revenue right now. By the end of the year, I don't think we're gonna get vans by the end of the year. Honestly, it's my opinion. They're on back order. So I don't, unless Fredericks has some and he's having a little bit of, they're playing phone tag, let's just put it that way. So, I don't even know if they're gonna have any extra that they ordered that they would have available for us to purchase by June 30th.
Over 800,000, wow, I'm glad you mentioned that, yeah.
So,
That'll be in the
you know, I
budget
go back
presentation.
to- I go back to that comment, we've already kind of talked about it in September, that I think we've already said yes. It's just a matter of, do we give them an extra
$15,000 more each
$20,000
vehicle or, yeah.
to look for a 50, that's what it sounds
Right.
like to me. That sounds like a
Exactly.
different number to me. I don't know about anybody else, but I'm okay with saying if it's already in the budget and you're asking for $20,000.
And
Okay.
if it helps to benefit the students. If
Exactly.
it's gonna give them more opportunities to do more things, to
Then I'm
explore
good.
more things, I'm okay with it.
When you were talking like, $100,000 that wasn't scheduled in the budget, then I was, so thank you for saying it was in the budget.
Well, we had planned on it in
Got it,
September,
right.
so money was put aside, but.
Well, and had they been available, we wouldn't even be having this
We wouldn't be
conversation.
having this
Correct.
conversation.
So,
They
I
would have been
mean,
purchased already.
So I would be
That was
okay
the premise
going
that
to
we
the
went
50
on, that it was
passenger.
gonna be the best for the kids in the school. So,
Right.
Originally, so as long as we keep that in mind, if there's a little bit of tweaking up and down, we may have to do that, but let's see the numbers.
Yeah, we will keep coming back as we continue to get information and hopefully identify available vehicles.
Let's just not lose out on a vehicle by prolonging anything too long.
Yeah, I agree.
So that we're not.
Any other questions for Mr. Mann? Anyone? Mr. Mann, do you have anything else?
That's it, I thank you very much.
Okay, then I will turn it over to you, Mr. Kern.
Okay. Talk. Allergy time. All right, we'll open up the, no, it's not, is it
No,
me?
it should be Mrs. Cole.
Oh, I was gonna say.
finance, they're not in the right order.
Finance next? I was just following through the, okay, I was just following, I'm sorry.
The papers are in the wrong
Okay.
order, that's correct. It
All
should
right,
be
then I will
finance
turn it
next.
over to,
Well, my name is on
Rhonda.
finance,
Right.
but that's all right.
So first up is cafeteria update. And Nikki, I'll go with you.
Okay, so just to kind of recap from before last month, regarding like some food service equipment that's been needed the last couple of years, we always apply for that food service equipment grant. We did not get it again, unfortunately, this past year, but they asked us to pick our top 2 priority pieces of equipment, which has been actually 2 dishwashers, one for Peters and one for the high school being, you know, the priority of the 2. Both are above 42 years old, so that's why, you know, we felt the need that those are, some of the parts are not even around anymore to replace it, so, but since then, as I had mentioned last month, our middle school steamer has been very inconsistent, and that has now also become a priority for us. And I was able to get some updated quotes. So just to throw some numbers out there, for the middle school steamer, these numbers include installation, would be $23,299. For the high school dishwasher, quote including installation, $77,278.51, with a grand total of those 2 pieces, which are the 2, you know, most in priority, would be a total of $100,577.51. We had an excess cash resources in the food service department at the end of last year of $67,028.91. So the difference there would be $33,548.60 in terms of, you know, potentially in the budget for this year. And for Peters Elementary, that dishwasher with installation included would be $63,807.25. You know, looking into next year's budget, potentially budgeting that in, because that would be third in line of priority for us. And I know that Sherry and Matt were gonna go further into that during the budget discussion following this, so, but if anybody has any questions at this time.
So that's 67,000. Is that what you had left after last year, is what you're saying?
Yeah, that's our excess cash resources at the end of last year.
Is that what you currently have?
When you say last year, you're talking 23 or 24?
23, at the end of 23.
Yeah.
So what happened this year? Do you have any extra money from this year that you know of?
We won't know that usually until we do our child nutrition financial report in December. So every year it's due at the end of December. So that's when we
Okay, so
know
that's
like for
before
sure
one.
what we
Okay.
have left from the prior year.
At the last meeting, you mentioned money that she had to spend.
That's
Is that
that is that
67,000?
67,000.
Okay, all right,
Correct.
okay.
And then she still has 3 months worth of operating revenue
Okay.
yet as well. So this is over and above her 3 months worth of operating revenue. And then I anticipate that number is going to climb
That was my
this
point.
year.
We got more
Correct.
this year, yeah.
Exactly.
So that would give you money to cover the extra money that you get, or would that be something you'd have to spend on equipment?
Again, once we do the financial reports, it's gonna come out and say, this is the 3 months worth of operating revenue that you have, this is how much extra money you have. So I think that 67 is gonna climb to like 75, 80,000 next year.
Just for next year's numbers, not
Right.
including that?
Which would include the 67,
Oh,
because they're gonna end up saying, this is how much you have at the end of the year. Again, we're starting back at 0. This is what you have at the end of the year. This is your 3 months worth of operating revenue. How much is over that? That's what you have to spend. So if she would have a year in a loss, that 67,000 would go down. It would go the other way, but she doesn't have a year in a loss.
But so she's gotta spend that though?
Does she have to spend that in a certain time?
No,
Okay.
she
So
does
it just
not.
carries over, it's like in
Oh,
a savings account.
Correct.
okay,
Okay,
so that
okay.
makes more sense,
Yeah.
okay.
Correct. She has to have, we have to put in a corrective action plan to the state that we were going to use it in some form, or what were we using it for, which is what we submitted the dishwasher for at this point in time. Doesn't say you have to use it within a specific amount of time.
So that's how that number could grow to 75 or something, but it just
Right.
gets added additional.
Correct, it's
going
the
forward.
additional,
Yeah.
what she would have incurred
Okay,
this year.
that makes a little more sense.
And you said the Peters dishwasher is third in line, obviously. Is it still working, or is it, like, why is it third in line?
Because it hasn't given us as many issues as the high school, and we haven't put as many like patches on it, over the last couple of years since I've been here. So just for that sake. But age-wise, they're only like 2 years difference in age. Like the high school is older than Peters, but only like 2 years. So
So you're anticipating
age-wise
that
and-
one will go eventually,
Yeah.
and start
Yeah.
patching that one up.
yeah.
Yeah, because I'm just wondering, I just don't want to keep throwing repair money and equipment, like parts and stuff at it.
That's the same thing we found out with our HVAC system and stuff. You keep throwing more money at it and the expenses keep getting more costly to repair. You're better off just buying a new piece of equipment.
So what would be your recommendation? What would you like, if we can afford it?
To get a new high school dishwasher and middle school steamer like ASAP, and then following budget plan for Peter's dishwasher.
If you would want to consider it, look at our current state of finances and say do all of it now, we're talking of $97,355 potentially from our fund balance to replace all 3 of them
All 3.
at the same time.
How did you get that? I didn't get quite that number, but
Sure, so the high school dishwasher with installation is a little over 77.
I got 77, 23, and 53. Did I add wrong?
Yeah, so your paper, so the quote for the Peters dishwasher is not on the paper copy. It just came in today.
So you add another, what was it, 50?
63, almost $64,000.
Oh, okay, I thought you said 60, so that's why I came up with a different number. Okay, then I agree with you, yes.
Again, we'll be looking for direction on, whether the school board wants to do it all at once, if they want to do two pieces of equipment and then one in the 25-26 budget. So we'll talk through that through the budget presentation.
That's it?
That's it.
Anything that you think is going to change with the Lunch and Learn program as far as packaging, what you're gonna have to do?
I think it's gonna be very similar to like the paper products we're using now. We're trying to, you know, just use our
suck in
trays
our
and
balls.
fill, you know, use our dishwasher and, or our regular trays, not foam trays. There might be a little bit more grab and go items that we offer that will be spending some extra funds in paper products, but the bulk of it, if we can avoid, you know, not switching to foam trays and, you know, paper products for everything we do, that's what we're trying to avoid doing, and sticking with our trays and just kind of operating as normal. So, yeah, because we do, like, we've been offering grab and go-ish type of meals. Like, we have like all of our salads, our sandwiches are like alternate from like our main items that you go through the line, our hot items. We have been using like plastic clamshells for those. Again, try to limit our paper uses as much as we can, but I don't foresee that expense climbing too much from what it's been. So,
Just thought it was worth an ask.
yeah.
Anybody have any more questions? for Nikki?
Just to add to that, lunch and learn, Mr. Stroll, next year, will all LCTI students be eating lunch with us?
Yes, they will.
Okay, every single one of them?
Correct.
Okay, so that could be, and I look to Mrs. Fink for this, that could be an additional revenue generator if they're all eating with us.
I think we said like 50 students, give or take, additional, you know, meal counts for lunch that we weren't getting before.
Correct. It would be the junior class of students that go out in the morning.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anything else for food service?
Do you want comments on this now, or do you want to wait for the budget, or?
I think we'll wait for budget.
Okay.
Yep, we can discuss it during that.
Whoever's gonna do the presentation.
All right. I will turn it over to Dr. Link. He seems to start the presentation.
And I'm gonna pull my notes up here, give me 1 second.
Only like 6 slides. 6 slides.
Okay, so most of this you have seen before, and we're not going to go through every single slide. However, if you want us to revisit anything from, you know, either this evening or previous nights, just let us know. We're happy to do so. Mr. Hill, if you can go to the next slide, please. Here, this is the same numbers. I will say that for kindergarten enrollment, as of last count, we have 110 kindergarten students in the registration process, 105 fully complete, and 5 are in the process. And then our inaugural KinderQuest is expecting to have up to 87 children participate, but 47 of those 87 are fully committed at this point. So those numbers have not changed since the last time we looked at them. Okay, next slide, Mr. Hill, please. Okay, so here are some of the new considerations that we've kind of been touching on in the last couple committee meetings here. And you'll see that at the top there are recommended actions for food services. And so it has the 2 dishwashers, the steamer, and again, the total general fund contribution would be $97,357. If that $67,028 that Mrs. Fink has to spend down, if that doesn't change, that's what we would owe, $97,357. For the high school auditorium, sound system upgrades, $53,782. That includes the sound system upgrades, the sound dampening panels, and the dedicated iPad. And then stage rigging, we're still working through that. We're thinking $150,000 to $200,000. Last time we were all together, the committee and the board asked us to, are there any other things that are one-time expenses that we're thinking of? So we thought about it, and we said, well, actually, yes. What?
What a surprise.
Last.
I did.
So we're putting,
I did.
thank you, Mrs. Cole.
Yell at me, I did.
We're putting up here for consideration,
I just want to know what.
a
the
digital
district needs.
marquee
That's
for the
what I'm asking.
PES and a digital marquee for Slatington. I have fairly recent quotes on both of those, each at $50,000, actually a little bit less, but the quotes are, at this point, probably about 5 months old, so I put them each to 50. That's a total of all of that, if the board directed administration to take action on all of this and include it in the budget that we're currently working on, it would be an additional $451,139 out of the fund balance. And then as we continue to go through tonight's presentation, you'll see where we are with our current fund balance, some incoming projections. I can share with you that I contacted Representative Mako today, and he got back to me almost within an hour. And he said it could be December until we know when we have a budget. He said they are still, he said the Senate and the governor's office are still, they're not close. So I know that's not good news, which is why I think it's important that we continue to budget a little bit conservatively, like Mrs. Molitor's has been with expected state revenues. We'll go through the rest of the presentation, and then we're going to come back to this and kind of look for direction on these items on this slide.
You have the 200,000 and the 451.
Yeah, I
Yeah, we
included
did
the high
200.
end. Yep.
Okay, I
Do
just
you want to address
did a
the
quick
other
addition.
little
I wanna make
lines?
sure.
So, part of this is that moving forward, one of the things that administration wants to recommend to do is have a greater sense of equity among programs such as our theater department and our band as compared to athletics. In our athletics, we have dedicated budget lines built in. For band, we have a small amount built into the building level budgets for things like instrument replacements or repairs, but not to the extent that we do for, say, football shoulder pads and football helmets and all the equipment that goes into some of the other varsity sports that we have. And then for theater, it's kind of like every few years we say, hey, we need to replace microphones or something like that. But they really budget out of the theater booster group. We pay for the theater director, and all other associated positions are budgeted through the theater's boosters budget. And as we talk through this, for me the comparison is we have a head coach and we have assistant coaches. We have a theater director, we pay for all those, by the way. And then we have a theater director, and then somebody else pays for their assistants. Or we have a band, and somebody else pays for most of their assistants, or are they trying to do it through volunteers? We know that we see our band numbers growing. You saw the performance that we had for Footloose. It was phenomenal. We got robbed at the Freddy's. I feel like we should start building in line items for programs like that, like we do for athletics. Happy to take that direction now, or happy to say this has to be an expectation going into the 25-26 school year budgets. So I'm just kind of putting that out there. I want to start advocating more strongly for some of these other student groups because they are giving great opportunities for our students to do things that they may not otherwise have the opportunity to do. Okay, Mr. Hill, next slide, please.
Oh, this one's me. Let me find it on my computer. All right, so all along I've been kind of saying I thought we were going to put about $624,000 back in the fund balance. I just did numbers again this weekend, looked at payrolls, anticipated through the end of the year. I think we're going to be closer to $825,000 we're probably going to put back in the fund balance at the end of the year. So that means by the end of the June 30th, 2024, we're looking at an ending fund balance of somewhere around $16.871 million. So almost $16.9 million we're going to have in fund balance. That yellow highlighted area in there is, again, the stuff that we have been saying all along was going to come out of fund balance this year. That's that $420,000 for those technology upgrades, the feasibility study, $200,000 for bond payment, the LA program, and our PSERS increase. So that's where our currently is what we are going to be looking at somewhere in our estimated fund balance by June 30th of this year. We should somewhere be in the neighborhood of $16.8 million. Mr. Hill, next slide, please. So then, again this weekend, I worked on the open enrollment period ended. Open enrollment period ended, we saw $32,000 decrease in our enrollment for health insurance. So that took our expenses down now to $39,724,000 and change. Revenues total $38,720,000, which again does not at this point in time include any kind of a tax increase. Okay, so there's no tax increase built in at this point. It's staying status quo. Our use of fund balance for the one-time purchases that I just spoke about on the last slide is roughly $420,000. So our budget shortfall right now is $583,000. That's a little bit less than what we saw last month. It was in the 620-some thousand. And that's because of the savings that we saw in the insurance benefits. So if we use fund balance for these expenses, the proposed final budget still has a deficit of $583,000. So prior to any kind of a tax increase being utilized, that's where we stand. Additionally, the board can also approve to purchase from fund balance all, some, or none of those additional one-time purchases that we just talked about this evening and brought forward to you. So that was the kitchen, the stuff for the kitchen, it was the stuff for the high school auditorium, and those markets. If the board does decide to do that, again, that's an additional $451,139. Projected end of year fund balance. So again, I was saying we're going to be somewhere around almost 16.9 million. If we use $420,000 out of that for the one-time purchases, we would end the 25 school year at 16.451, and that would be if the board decide to raise it to the 5.12% that we're currently short in our budget. And if the board chooses not to do that and they want to take all of the if the board chooses to do that and take all of the $583,000 out of our fund balance, left at the end of June of 25 would be somewhere around $15.9 million in our fund balance. Currently, we have $470,000 in potential state basic ed funding that is not in this equation yet either. So when I did the budget, I budgeted about $375,000. We're supposed to get roughly $300,000. We're supposed to get roughly about $770,000. So it's about $470,000 that is not anywhere, that if the state budget does come through and give us everything that the governor is saying, that's revenue that's not in this budget yet. So we could potentially see an increase in basic ed funding as well. Any questions on that?
You have more slides?
What?
Do you have more slides?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Next slide, Mr. Haas. Thank you. So this is the slide that we showed last month. This is where that homestead farmstead is coming in. So because we had such an increase in our homestead farmstead for this coming year, which is $238,000 in additional revenues, and the potential homestead farmstead properties that we already know that our taxpayers qualify for it. Every taxpayer is going to see an additional $73.17, estimated $73.17, could be a couple cents here or there, in additional revenue that will come off of their tax bill. So they're going to see more of they're going to go from, I think it was like $270-some thousand last year, or $270-some last year, to $354,000 or $354. It's going to go up to $427 this year. So that is what the taxpayers will see off of their tax bills. should be right around $427.78 off of their tax bills this year.
And that's for both counties, both Lehigh
That
and
is
Northampton.
both counties, yes, they
Will
both
see that
get the same, within a couple of cents. So in other words, like one might be 15 cents, the other might be 17, and that's just because the millage rate, you can't get them to equal, but
Yep.
they're within pennies of each other. Next slide, Mr. House.
Mr. Hill.
Or Mr. Hill, I'm sorry, Mr. Hill. All right, so this is the slide I'm thinking everybody wants to see. So again, utilization of fund balance is $420,000, and you know what? That additional shortage is last month's shortage. We didn't update this one. That's on me. Sorry about that. So that additional 621 should actually be that $583,000 should be that one there. So anyway, everybody cares more about what's the revenue going to do. So if the board, if you want to look at a 2%, you're going to get $458,000 in additional revenue. Of that, if we are short 583, you're looking at taking another $120,000 out of fund balance with the 420. Will get you to balance our budget. That does not include any of those additional purchases that we talked about now for cafeteria and those things. So if you would decide to want to take that out of fund balance, you can either take it out of fund balance, or you can say, I want to look at a 2.25, I want to look at a 2.5 and recoup some of that money that way instead of taking it all out of fund balance.
And that also doesn't include any possible additional revenue.
Correct, does not include the additional $470,000 that we are slated to receive from basic ed from the state, if that would come through. Correct.
Which is still an if.
It's
But
still an
but
if.
It's a possibility.
Correct. So if, let's play the hypothetical if, if that 470,000 comes through, the all new additional things that we brought to you tonight were $464,000. So they would basically wash each other out. We would get that extra revenue and we could use it to buy all that stuff. But again, that's a hypothetical if, because we don't know what's happening with the state budget. Next, any questions on this slide? All right, so this is the impact on the taxpayer. So again, if we do a 2% in Lehigh County, it's going to increase that home with the immediate assessed value of $150,850. Their tax bill will go up by $76.57. However, they're going to see $73 in additional revenue off of their tax bill this year for homestead and farmstead. So in Lehigh County, they're going to see less than a $4 tax increase this year. Northampton County, because of the way steps shook out this year, theirs would be $178.11, so $73 and change would come off of that. They would be looking at a little over $104, $105 on a median assessed home value at $46,250.
How much would a 2% increase come out to money-wise?
That was on the last slide, $458,000 in additional revenue. Go back then, but I think that's what it was. Yeah. Yes, 458. Yep.
And just for the record, Sherry, if my memory's correct, a couple of years ago, I don't remember exactly when it was, but the numbers were kind of flipped. Where
Yep.
Northampton
Northampton.
people paid
Yes.
almost nothing, and
They-
Lehigh
Yes.
got hit that year because of that stupid formula that they
Yes.
had. So,
Northampton County actually saw a decrease in their tax bills that year.
Yeah.
Correct. Yep.
It wasn't much, it was a couple bucks, but
Right.
it was a decrease anyway, even though the overall.
And
tax went up.
Northampton, and Lehigh counties went up.
Yep.
Yep, $100 or whatever it was that year. Correct. Yep. Any discussions on this so far? Because we're getting to the
So let me
end.
just, I guess I'm gonna just call this out. So if we were to do a 2%, basically you would really be only raising the taxes on Lehigh County, just Lehigh County for the homestead, farmstead.
Correct.
Because they're getting that break, they would only be getting like a $4 such increase. Is
On
that-
the home of a median assessed value at $158.50. So that's that person. So if you're looking at somebody who has maybe a home at like 200 or 205,000, you're probably looking at like $28 or $29.
So what's the median here, 158?
158.50 is the median assessed value. It's in the parentheses in the red. And then for Northampton County, it's the 46,250.
Yeah. And does that tax rate happen year to year, or is that like just something that's because of a formula?
The homestead farm.
Yeah, the
Yeah,
homestead,
That
the
it
reason.
offsets that way?
Yeah, so it has to do with homes that go on the market, homes that have sold, the reappraisal value
Okay,
of
so it does
homes.
change year
And
to year.
it changes year to year
Okay.
based on what's happening in the market.
Okay.
And these formula right now are using stead market value from 2022.
Okay.
So they always lag almost 2 years behind as well.
Okay.
Any comments anybody wants to make?
So we can put up the updated recommendation slide, and then maybe that's the best time to open it up for conversation. So Eric, if you, Mr. Hill, if you can go one more slide, please. And, yep, there we go. Up, back one. The one that says administrative recommendations.
Yep, so forward one more. One more. There you go.
Thank you, sir. So here, this first bullet is a new bullet. All the other ones are remaining, so maybe I'll kind of work backwards. We're going to continue to search for expenditure savings. We're going to continue to look for grant revenue opportunities. Consider a tax increase in conjunction with the utilization of fund balance to close the gap. And then, not only for the immediate year, but also an eye towards multiple years out. If we were to continue to do a tax increase, what are some big projects that we may want to do 4, 5, 10 years out from now? And then also include any new recommendations from the Finance Committee for one-time purchases. So these would be those new purchases that we brought forth this evening for Food Services Department, high school auditorium, and potentially upgrade the marquees at Slatington Elementary School and Peters Elementary School. So administration, I guess, is seeking direction onto what, if any, would you like us to include from the new recommendations?
Sherry, on the shortfall page where it was the 583,000
Yes.
and change,
Yep,
that did not include any of the additional items.
that is correct. That is
So
correct.
that shortfall would be not doing anything of the new stuff.
Correct.
Okay, thank you for
That is
clarification.
correct. Yeah.
Now,
Yeah, we didn't include any of that in here because we just didn't know what the board wanted to choose. Yeah.
so at the beginning of the presentation, you ended up saying you are going to be putting $800,000 into fund balance
Yep.
that we were gonna spend this year, okay, that we did not spend. That money could take care of that 500 and some thousand dollars that we're talking about, correct?
That's in these numbers. Is
That's-
the 800?
It's not 800 plus, because she was thinking fund balance was going to be what?
I was thinking fund balance was going to be about 16.6, and now it's going to be 16.8, almost
Right.
16.9.
Yeah, so she's adding to it.
Correct.
Adding.
Correct, but in the original budget presentation, what you thought we were getting in fund balance has already been put in there. So we're getting an additional 300 and some $1,000 or $200,000 more
Correct.
that isn't in the original figures. It's not 800,000, it's 200,000.
Right. Correct.
You understand what I'm saying?
Correct.
Donna's assuming that $800,000 is not in there yet,
Right. Right.
but all but
all
200,000.
but 200 of it. Now I increased it, and I'm
Correct.
saying, right, what we were saying at the end of the year, we would have been at 16 million 600 and some thousand. Now 16 million 800 and some thousand.
Right.
Correct. Yep.
So the additional is included in the numbers that were presented tonight, right?
Right.
The additional 800.
That's
Right.
additional 200.
The additional
200.
200, yeah.
Yes.
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 So that's.
It
still
isn't
leaves-
800 is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So that still leaves the shortfall at the 583.
Right, because you have to remember that that fund balance has nothing to do with the shortfall between my
Right.
revenues and my expenditures.
Correct.
It has nothing to do with that. The shortfall between the revenue and the expenditures are just there. It's, do we want to use the money in fund balance to cover any of that cost? You got it.
I want to put it a little different way from what Bob said. And the bottom line to me you're putting 800,000 into fund balance roughly. Okay.
Correct.
To me, that means we had $800,000 more in our budget last year than we would have needed to cover all expenses. We were
Right.
gonna have a zero-based budget. So going into this year's budget, assuming many things stay the same, and I realize they don't, there's an extra $800,000 already built into that
Right.
budget. And I think we overlook that a lot of times, and we just say, well, we put in this much last, let's put in this much and a little bit more, and
You
not
have to
realizing
realize,
that.
right, that what some of that is the fact that I only had $200,000 built in for interest, and we realized over $900,000 in interest. We also didn't do any kind of increase with the state budget this past year, because we always budget flat. This year, I actually budgeted $370-some thousand out of basic ed funding, saying, we're gonna get probably 50% of it, let's budget close to that. So that's where a lot of that money is coming into play. It's not that we didn't expend it, it's that our revenues were down so low because we didn't know what was happening in the market.
But I hear what Matt's saying, you know, we keep saying we need the tax increases, and we're putting money back in, like our savings account. Is that what you're saying, Matt?
Essentially, Donna, yes, and I understand some of it's interest money, some of it might have been more taxes, more tax, whatever, wherever it
Yep.
came from, you know. But nevertheless, there was an extra 800,000 that came in that we didn't need. So all things being equal next year, if nothing goes up 1 penny, which I know it will,
Right.
there'd be an extra $800,000 in that budget. Now, it's not gonna be 800, but it's gonna be something.
Right, and I'm gonna say that I also increased my interest this year from $200,000 to $900,000 this year, because I saw that's what happened this year. I am projecting, I already know that I already have that 6-month CD that I did, that I'm gonna see almost $300-some thousand in that. So I didn't do the low side with the revenues, because I already said, okay, I can still get this kind of interest, let's show the actual interest. So the actual interest that I'm showing is now being offset by the expense. That's why we're seeing now only a $500,000 shortage, where last year we were over $1 million some, or almost $1.2 million short. Yep.
And we got additional money from the state, though.
Correct.
Last year, that would have covered a lot of what we said we were short, correct?
Right, because we budget according to flat at what it was the year before and not what it ended up being. Correct.
Right, and we're saying we may get another
We could
increase,
potentially get
400,000
another
from the
400,
state.
potentially. Yep. And that's the problem
Sherry,
with the state not having the.
With our negotiated contracts,
Mhm.
now we did 3, I believe. What is the total, give me a round figure. I know I can't, but what is that extra cost on all, just year 1 for next year? Because we negotiated them this year, so obviously raises and benefits are gonna increase next year. Like, what is that 1 year total that we need to?
So I have what this year's, hold on. So this year, I'm estimating at the end of the year, our wages and salaries and benefits are gonna be 24.3. Let me add them together. Hold on. Short little.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. $24,400,000. And I have in for next year, 25,789. Now that's everything. That's PCERS, that's healthcare, that's soup to nuts on everything on the payroll and benefits side of things. So what's that, $1 million, $1.3 million?
$1,300,000.
$1.3 million.
Almost 4, right. Okay.
Now again, you budget on subs. Now again, if we went all year with pretty much only 3 permanent subs, I still budget 4, hopefully in anticipation we get the 4th one. But every time you have a position that's not filled, that's savings that you're not seeing. But you have to budget for the fact that we're gonna fill all these positions, but you don't know that.
And then we might have leaves.
Yeah.
We're hiring new people.
Correct.
New families.
Mm-hmm.
So, those are, we can't expect what those costs are going to be.
Right.
But you got to plan for it.
Yep, exactly.
Well, you could also have placements too that you're not anticipating,
Right,
and those are huge costs.
Yeah.
correct. Correct. Who knows what's, I mean, hope we have something that happens with charter school reform. But if the charter school reform doesn't I have to budget like it's not happening. Because if it doesn't happen, and I take it back to, oh, we're gonna have a $300,000 savings because the government says they're gonna cap this,
Right.
and it doesn't come through, well, then our budget's short.
Yeah.
So you're constantly budgeting the hypothetical what if.
Thank you.
I guess my only point is if our fund balance was, 500,000, I'd be scared to death, and
I
I'd be
would be
willing for
too.
that 5%, for that 5% tax increase. But it isn't, it's 16 million, so
Mhm.
I feel a little more comfortable with that kind of support rather than it being down at next to nothing.
I
We
would-
do have some money in the bank, so to speak.
Wholeheartedly.
And I realize that I don't want to get in an argument on
No, I
what's
wholeheartedly
assigned and
agree
what's
with
not
you.
assigned and what we're
Mhm.
anticipating and stuff, I understand that, but, there's still a hefty chunk of change there.
Also hearing that the potential of not having a budget through December, that's a little concerning, because
Mhm.
that means we don't get our money from the state
Yep.
and the government. So
Yep.
it is nice to have that as a safety net for our administration and our staff, that they know that we're fiscally in a good place to continue to pay the bills.
Mhm.
So we have to keep that in mind too. Don't get me wrong, 16 million, I'm like, but it's something we have to think about as well, is the financial safety of our district.
Last time I didn't have a budget, we got our money from the state at the school district, didn't we?
We got it in January, when the
January.
budget was passed in January, it was the
Right.
end of January till they finally released our first set of funding then.
Yeah.
And we were very fortunate where we did not have to go where there was a lot of other school districts who literally had to go to borrow money,
Yeah.
short-term
Right.
borrowing in order,
You go
paid
borrow
high
money
interest
now.
rates and all that other kind of stuff in
Right.
order to just to make payroll. They were making
Yeah.
payroll.
I understand.
Yep.
You were very lucky, very fortunate.
So, would you like to give administration would the committee like to give administration any direction tonight on those new considerations? And then we can have that updated numbers for the full board this upcoming Monday. Would you like to think about it until Monday, and then we can hopefully turn something around for June 24th? The more information, the more direction we have now, the more we can lock in the numbers as we continue to move forward. The numbers that we control.
Despite what I've been saying about not having a big tax increase, I'm very much interested in the administration looking at those items that they brought up tonight, the dishwashers and those things. I'm not saying I'm ready for them, but yeah, let's keep them in there, let's take a look at them, let's get some updated numbers, like the rigging, 150 to 200,000, that's a pretty big difference, maybe we can tie some of those down into June. I don't know if you can or not, but.
That's not figured in, was that figured in your numbers?
Yeah,
The 150 to 200,000?
Yeah,
it's not
we
on
used
that one,
200.
the extra
That's
four-
right,
yeah.
The extra 400, whatever thousand,
Yep,
yeah.
464.
But I'm interested in looking at doing those things. We need dishwashers, we need them, for God's sake. It's like,
That can become a health issue.
absolutely.
I mean, that,
Yeah, I
I mean,
agree that we
I think
we
the
need 'em.
dishwashers are like a priority.
And so is,
honestly.
and so is the steamer, because you're talking
Yeah,
about
like
health
anything
issues.
related to the food and consumption and all that, like that's a priority in my mind.
Sure, I'm with Matt, I would like to see it included
With
in.
everything? Okay.
And if the board gets into discussion, if we decide to eliminate, just be prepared, like, we're gonna eliminate this.
Pull it
Now
out.
what is the impact?
Okay.
And I don't know.
Okay.
I mean, I wanna mull over. I like the idea of having school vans. I mean, I remember what it was like when we did. And I think that it's going to, I'm looking at science clubs, I'm looking, environmental clubs, I'm looking at, the opportunities that it presents for small groups of students. I don't know, but I gotta weigh that against what we need in our kitchens, so. I just like if there's a discussion and we pull one out, that we're prepared, you know, because I don't know what everybody's thinking. I know what I'm thinking, but,
Right. I'd rather pull out than worry about putting things in.
Right.
Yeah.
I agree with that too. Okay. We could do that.
Anybody else?
If the board remembers, and the reason we're on this dishwasher discussion is I said at the one meeting, if there's something specifically you want to look at, bring it up. And I think it was Donna at the last meeting brought it up. So I guess I would throw the same thing on the table. If there's anything else that administration hasn't brought up, that you want to take a look, you know, the sooner you can get that to them, the better. And we do have a meeting on Monday, we can talk about it, and we do have a final meeting on whatever that is, at the end of the month, I forget, 28th or something, the last fourth,
Yeah,
the fourth Monday, whatever it is. So we do have time to work into those numbers, but again, if there's something you really, really want to see, now's the time to get it out there and not on the 28th when, you know, things are already figured out, so. Because Sherry's gonna have to do a lot of preparation work on if it's here, and here, and that kind of stuff, so that's all I'm saying.
On that note, Mr. Green, is the committee comfortable with us? So one of the other things that we brought up tonight is not equipment, but maybe increasing some line items for things like band, actually starting to build and for, so middle school band, high school band, and then the theater program. Is that something that you would also like us to see come back with for a week from tonight?
I personally would like to see that.
yes.
Yes.
I'd like to see the music teacher put back in the middle school.
Currently at the middle school, and we're hoping to build it back at more time at the high school. Yes, because the high school, it dipped in the high school, but very quickly, we're gonna need 1,000 students moving up to the high school. We don't want them to not have that same opportunity at the high school, so.
Can we start a rugby program?
Start a what?
A what?
A rugby program, can we play rugby?
Boy, just like that, everybody on that side of the table went.
School-sponsored martial arts.
And Sherry, this budget does include an increase for school budgets, individual school
Yes.
budgets.
Yep,
Okay,
it
Yeah, that was
does.
10%, I think, right?
10,000.
10,000.
10,000, okay.
And even our SPO, I think I put 7,000 in, or no, I think he's 10,000 too, because he had a peanut budget, like less than $5,000, and we gave him 10 as well. So
Okay.
all the building budgets and our SPO. Correct.
And as far as furniture that needs for lunch and learn, that's included as well?
They already bought that this year,
Okay,
We have it.
so that's already
all
bought.
right, very good.
And again, that's one of the things, like, we intend on spending down the budget, the fund balance for purchasing more furniture once we get our feasibility study back and they determine our needs and stuff there as well.
Thank you.
Okay, so all the equipment, adjustments to band and theater, we're gonna hold on rugby, we're gonna hold on martial arts. And
We never would.
But would you like us to start factoring in, Mrs. France put out there a music teacher. If we have it, I think we, it's kind of like feel free. If it's there, I think we're at the point where those classes are gonna start to fill. I'll look to Mr. Stroll, mostly Mr. Stroll and Mr. Hauser on this. I think we now have the schedule that will be okay next year. If that doesn't happen, but if you want us to look at that now, we're happy to look at that.
Based on the documents I've seen, as far as enrollment goes, I think we're okay for next year. The year after that, I think it's more worthy of a serious discussion on the position, my humble opinion. Some of the information I got from Mr. Carroll, I'll just share one of the statistics that I was ecstatic to see. There's an 87% retention rate of students who begin in middle school in the band program versus them wanting to continue at the high school level. We have not seen anywhere near that in the last number of years. 23-24, we increased the band size by 30%. Next year, it's an increase of 60%, which is very nice. And there's multiple reasons for that, but it's the
And that's data as of today, I believe.
that he sent that earlier this morning. Yes, sir.
Just to confirm on that one, maybe this goes to what you're suggesting, Dr. Link. If we start adding that many programs, does that indicate, how do they pay for their uniforms and the stuff that they currently wear to bring the Northern Lehigh marching band or program?
Yeah, so the band uniforms is part of a general fund expense. Rhonda probably remembers, I think the last time we bought Lisa Blank was here and we had uniforms come in and we were trying them on and, but yeah, it would be, that's a general fund expense. So I don't know if they have extra uniforms down there. I would think probably not.
My understanding is that the band parents and the boosters either pay to have them fixed or they do the stitching themselves.
Correct.
And those uniforms are getting pretty old.
That was exactly what I was gonna say. Lisa Blank's probably
They're-
gone
they're
for
really
almost
due
20
for an
years at this
upgrade.
point in
Yeah.
time. They're probably due for an upgrade. I wouldn't doubt that.
Can you get that information for Monday?
So we can come back with a proposed number. I think even if, so we can build in what the cost of a teacher would be. To Mr. Hauser's point, what we may want to do is start building for programming and then 25, 26, look at a teacher, right? So so whomever those teachers are, right, at that point, we would be back to 3 full-time teachers. And then Mrs. Vinar does some over at Peters Elementary School. They would actually have an operating budget to work with.
How does adding a teacher at the high school affect the scheduling that you folks are doing?
Well, I'll look to Mr. Stroll and Dr. Stoker to kind of speak to this, but my first inclination would be it's going to open up more opportunities for those students, and we're going to lose less kids that are interested in being in the band.
I just didn't
As
know
far as
from your
actual
block,
scheduling wise?
from your block scheduling and the whole bit, that's what I wasn't sure about.
Go ahead, Mike, I'm sorry. So currently, we, next year, we will be sharing the music teacher with the middle school, and the numbers are okay there. But like Mr. Hauser said earlier, though, I'm seeing just as many 7th grade students coming up, it's a big number, that are the same number as 8th, 9th, and 10th and 11th graders that are interested in joining band at the high school level. So as far as scheduling, though, they'll teach as many classes as, contractually they can, which we're going to try to fill it as best we can.
One of the factors that I think was really contributing to keeping band numbers low at the secondary level was the schedules, at least at the middle school, and I believe the high school to some degree, just because of the availability, were not built to suit band or instrumental lessons. They were built to suit a general music curriculum, which is a tier 1 readily available to all students as essentially an encore or an exploratory course, something along those lines. At the middle school this year, we put in specific enrichment and remediation time during the day that allowed for band practices to move from a solely after-school program to a during-the-day program a few times a week. And that has kept kids very consistent in their practicing, so there's much more availability. I think the next step is to put in some instrumental lesson time into the schedule where it is feasible to do so. At the middle school, we're going to run general music next year for 7th grade in one given quarter, for 8th grade in another given quarter. Those other 2 quarters allow for sharing at the high school, but the less kind of sharing we have to do, the more we open other things up, such as instructional time, one-on-one with certain segments of bands. Right now, the enrichment at the middle school is running the entire band. In theory, with an extra position down the line, we could have dedicated jazz band time, dedicated concert band time, dedicated sectional time, that type of thing. So that's kind of where I think we need to go if we're going to see a thriving program. That's a couple steps down the line.
Similarly, at the high school, Mr. Hauser's enrichment program, we're looking at lunch and learn to sort of be the same thing there. So where a student in band would like to go down and meet with their music teacher during that time, we want to encourage our students to bring a friend down there, and so then that hopefully they want to like join more music classes and band in itself as well. So that's what we're hoping that period does.
Okay. I'm glad to hear that. That's just wondering how that was gonna affect when you get that many more students who want to take the course, if you will.
As long as we have the students and we have the teacher, it would fit all right into the schedule we're proposing. There wouldn't be any issues there.
Okay. As long as we have the teacher availability. then.
Yep, as
Okay.
long as the students are continuing to build and we have the staff to man those, or, to teach those courses.
Okay. Matt, I say put it on the list for Monday night.
Or hold, if it wouldn't be functionable till next year, just
Yeah.
make sure that it's an item to add for next year.
That's true.
Like
Yes.
the teacher aspect
Yeah.
of it,
Yeah,
but
teacher
the
aspect,
other
but-
parts of it.
But if you
Yeah.
were talking about
Program
uniforms or
costs.
something,
Yeah.
yeah.
Boosters pay for something.
Anybody else have any questions or recommendations for the budget? I know we haven't talked about what a number is that we were looking at. I guess we'll save that till Monday for how we go with whether there's a tax increase and how much it would be. So we would save that for Monday evening. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that correct?
I'm not sure we can really talk about that a whole lot at a committee meeting. I think that needs to be at a public meeting. I don't know. I'm guessing, but that might cross that sunshine law.
Yeah, I think it does.
No, that's fine. We can discuss on Monday.
You can call Sherry and tell her what you think, but don't tell me whether you call her.
Anybody have anything else for the budget?
So I think there's one other area that's rapidly expanding as an area that you're all familiar with. And I'll let Dr. Stoker speak to this.
So if you're asking if there's other areas of need, I would say that within our ESL department, we continue to have a need. Our numbers continue to grow. We continue especially to get more newcomers. As the students come in, they are coming directly from other countries with either no English proficiency or limited English proficiency. Looking at the students that are families are filling out the English, the home language survey coming into kindergarten. We know that we have several more coming in each year. We don't have any students graduating this year from our ESL program. A few years ago, we had one teacher. When we had about 15 students, we went up to another partial teacher. We continue to have grown our staff as well. Right now, we have 2 full-time ESL teachers and 1 that is part-time. I would say that schedule that's part-time is probably about a third. So I would say we're at 2 1/3 teachers. And this year we're adding in a full-time K through 12 paraprofessional as well. We really could use another half to full teacher in the ESL department for logistics within scheduling, also to support the students that we have. We just can't get to all of the students that we need to on the basis that we need to be meeting with them and supporting them. And the needs just continue to grow. So I would say that that's definitely an area, if you're asking where we need more teachers or what areas that, we really need support, that's one of them.
I'll look to administration. I guess my question would be, hearing what Dr. Stoker just said, the conversation about a music teacher, I'm sensing maybe that the greater immediate need would be ESL. Is that, I'm just looking for.
Yeah, yes, sir. I'll say that would be the greater of the 2 needs on a more immediate basis. The Spanish instructional position presently held by Dr. Gonzalez at the middle school and the high school is a shared position between those buildings. In next year's schedule, 8th grade Spanish will run on a semester basis and not a quarterly basis. We have a need to expand that course. What that does, in kind of the trickle down of that expansion, is it makes Dr. Gonzalez and that position in general unavailable at the high school for their lunch and learn for at least half of the year. So that's time that could be used for ESL support services I think, and Mr. Stroll, correct me if I'm wrong, that's the most natural fit for such services in your schedule. He just would not be available for half of the school year for that. We would have to really stretch the position to make that work. The middle school we can make work a little bit more easily with how we have the schedule set up, because he's already there, and it's actually easier for the high school to share him with us than it is us to share him with them. Just that's the difference between a traditional schedule and a block schedule and a lunch and learn. Okay.
Dr. Stoker, any?
No, just that, you know, we have 3 people, but 2 and a third, you know, FTEs, full-time equivalent. So if we can have one more teacher, we'd have one in each building, that would really make it much easier to provide services to the students that are in need, with the paraprofessional then supporting all of the teachers K to 12.
Would you be looking for a full-time then, or like a half-time? Or
Sure, so it's a really difficult question at this point in the year. I would say we probably could survive with a half-time person, but obviously the optimum would be to have a full-time teacher. Right now it's difficult to tell because WIDA scores just came in at the end of May, and we have to now look at those scores and have conversations with teachers and other, you know, assessments to see if those students will exit out of the program or not. So that does not have to happen until October 1st. We have that time to try to make decisions on those students. We also have additional students coming in, and we never know what's going to happen with, you know, kiddos moving and either coming in or leaving throughout the year. So it's really hard at this point to tell. I would say moving into next year, if we had a half a teacher, that would definitely work. A full-time would be, you know, really good.
Of course, the only thing I'll add to all of that is, one, I'm appreciative of having this conversation. It's been a while since we've actually been having a conversation about what else must we do and what else do we want to do, right? There's a difference there. I think we're in a good place because of the work that Mrs. Baltors has been doing for years. When we're talking about staffing, just remember that those do become reoccurring costs. So just kind of also want to put that reminder out there for everyone.
So you said right now you have 2 1/3 positions, is that
I would
correct?
say it's about 2 1/3, yes. That changes from year to year just because of how many Spanish classes Dr. Gonzalez teaches between the middle school and high school. So that fluctuates a little bit, but it's probably pretty close to that right now.
So would you want to go from the third to the half, or are you looking for an additional full half? For a full-time, yeah, sorry.
We can definitely get by with we can definitely get by with a half, but it would certainly,
full-time would be better.
full-time would certainly you know, work, especially with the levels of the newcomers coming in. And also their job is to help support classroom teachers in making accommodations and, you know, working through ways to support the students within the different content areas. Which right now is very limited because they don't have that time. Their priority is really to meet with the students in one-on-one time with the students, not being able to support the teachers as much as they could.
Do we have any of those students in special ed?
We do. Yep. Yeah. We have some students that are both ESL and special education.
Just a sign of how our demographics are changing.
You can give us some numbers? Okay.
We can work on all of that.
I know it's Monday that we're talking, but if you could, that would be great.
Okay.
I think that's it for finance. Who would be next? I'm not sure if these are in the correct order.
I guess education is up. All right. Now we've spent all of our money, we don't have to talk much about education. Okay, Dr. Stoker, handbooks.
Do you want to, okay. You pass that down.
Sure.
Yeah, this is So the first item that we have on the agenda for this evening are the handbooks. So we're looking to approve the 24. There's no color in here. I've never seen that happen.
Unplug it and plug it back in.
That's always the first.
Sherry, you want to move up?
Yeah.
I heard a beep. Should we try the other?
I think it was hot.
Coming up for the popcorn for the show.
Mr. Hill, we've got no color.
Superintendent broke it.
I don't know, it's a long day.
So as we're working through that, we are looking to approve the 24-25 handbooks for each of the schools. The elementary books, thank you. The elementary handbooks will be a joint endeavor between Peters and Slatington, and the each of the other buildings, the middle school and the high school buildings, will be separate. We also have on here tonight the curriculum guide for the middle school that we're looking to approve. I got colors, so it's better than usual. There we go. We've got green. Alright, thank you. Okay, so Mr. Schneiderite and Mr. Briner, you are up with the elementary handbook.
Thank you, Dr. Stoker. I'm going to start us off and I'll pass it over to Mr. Briner. It's a pleasure to see you all tonight. I'm going to be focusing on the changes document. As you can see, we provided you the actual updated handbook with yellow highlights of new things, strike-throughs with things that are omitted. And there are not many changes this year to the elementary school handbook. We've spent a lot of time over the last 2 or 3 years really streamlining things and getting things up in order. So starting at the very beginning, and you can see we have a new cover. Thank you, Mr. Pine. There's a new logo at all of the buildings, which is fantastic. If you can go down, Dr. Stoker, you're controlling it. I'm not sure who's.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. If you basically, there's a lot of changes just in names and dates at the very beginning. Some of the general information were updated. The Director of Buildings and Grounds. We are going to make another change. That'll happen in all the handbooks. Just a Mr. Christopher Mann instead of Chris Mann, as to be more formal. Our school police officers are updated, as well as our new Board of Education members, and that's on page 6. We did update on, I believe it's the next page, Dr. Stoker, the non-discriminatory statement for the entire district. Yep, if you keep going down, please. These are things that are, again, just within all of the handbooks. Are consistent. The next big change is page 10, which is our new calendar. So that's, again, our district's calendar. That'll be in each handbook. And the next big change we'll focus on is actually on page 36 under the School-Wide Positive Behavior Support Framework and School Discipline section here. And I believe it's up one. There we go. So in this section, this is related to the disciplinary steps taken by adding by taking at the end of the year, as we're looking to define what students earn, their privileges of attending of our events. To add just some more specificity to it, rather than making a general statement, Mr. Briner and I decided to actually include a document that we share out with families at the beginning of the year that highlights those so that it's very clear to them, as well as, sorry, I blinked there. We also removed some statements that are embedded within those documents that no longer need to be in the, sort of the handbook itself, because again, we've included those documents. And the attendance requirements that were previously part of it, that's not a practice that we're currently following, so that was removed as a whole. So those are the updates up until page 36. Any questions on those? And I'll pass it over to Mr. Briner.
I just have one quick question. I saw that the one was taken out if they're suspended.
Correct.
Is that still that if they're not, did I read it wrong?
Yeah, and it
Sorry.
might be good, Dr. Stoker, maybe if you want to click on either the Peters or Slatington Elementary ones. So again, Ms. Husak, what we did was decide to, rather than making that bold statement, we basically included the documents which highlights it very specifically
Thank you.
about the requirements to, earn the privilege of attending things such as
Okay.
field trips, fun days, etc.
Thank you.
So it's a very, specific framework. So yes, that is still included in there, but with just more specificity.
Thank you.
Yep. Any other questions before I pass it over to Mr. Briner? Consider it passed.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to be taking the reins from here and bringing us home on the elementary handbook. So the next kind of change that there's some slight change in wording of fire drills. Just we didn't really like how this one line was worded. It's on page 38. So we rephrase that line from the fire drills. The next change comes on page 55, I believe.
I mean, it's 52 and 53.
I'm sorry, 52 and 53. And it's bringing our information regarding registration and withdrawal kind of up to date in terms of phone number, in terms of that we are now an entirely online registration system, just updating some of that language to be more specific about registration and withdrawal. Our next update is actually on 55, and it's just a year update for the breakfast lunch information. Next update goes to 60, page 60, under health services. And this is just the removal of a line under lice. Removal of the line, this condition not only has to be dealt with in school, but even more so at home. We did not like that line, the way it was worded, so we removed it. And then the next update is really our title documents. So this runs from 68 through 82. It's our updated Title I documents. So there's a number of them. I'm not going to go through every one, but they're updated for a year, and we took these documents to our annual Title I meeting, reviewed them with the families who attended there, took feedback. A lot of this is policy driven, and a lot of the information in these documents is information that we have to put in these documents and share with families. So those are all now updated. Again, page 68 through 82. The final couple of items that will be updated once everything is approved are the table of contents and kind of the index in the back, because we'll have to pull out all the extra formatting, which will then slightly maybe update some page numbers, and we'll
It's always off
clean-
by at least
clean
one
that up.
page, and
Yeah.
you're like, okay, let's change them all.
Yeah, it makes a difference.
And that is everything for the elementary school. Are there any questions? Okay,
All right,
thank you.
thank you. The next one is the middle school handbook.
Thank you, Dr. Stoker. Again, good evening, everyone. You'll see the general changes to word choice and aesthetics throughout that are highlighted. I won't go into all of those individually. The first substantial change is to page 5, Dr. Stoker. And that is our general contact update. Page 6 is the new school calendar. Page 7 begins changes to the master schedule. We are revising our master schedule for next year, so you'll have a strike through those. And then on the next page, you'll see the revised minute-by-minute schedule. So class sizes are right around 50 minutes. Goal team period looking at 40 minutes This eliminates the block days that we had at the middle school and puts us back on a Monday through Friday schedule as opposed to a day 1 through day 5 schedule. On page 9, you'll see the same thing, but for the 2-hour delay schedule being removed and then replaced with something more applicable to next year. On page 14, Dr. Stoker, you'll see that the SAP team language will be removed. It's not being cut from the handbook, it's being relocated to a more appropriate place just for organization. Pages 15 and 16, we did update the cafeteria language as per Mrs. Fink. Page 19 and 20. This year we did some revisions to how we calculate honor roll. As we had talked about at Curriculum Council, at the middle school it was technically mathematically possible for a student to have a majority of C's and C minuses and have one outlier grade and still make the honor roll. We felt that that should be earning A's and B's, earning straight A's, and then earning straight A's at a certain level. So those changes are reflected in this revision. Pages 21 and 22, we updated, we was basically striking some language that is stemming from revisions to the schedule. That language is no longer applicable because those parts of the schedule have been revised. So that was under our multi-tiered system of supports that has been revised to include an update into what we call goal team period. And then at the bottom, you'll see where we placed the student assistance program to put it near our systems of supports because that is a tier 3 support for students. We felt it was better placed there. Pages 29 and 30. This is simple reformatting, getting away from the table with our extracurriculars, no changes to content. Page 32, we codified in the handbook some procedures that we have regarding the cafeteria. We don't want students taking food and drink from the cafeteria unless they have to. Believe it or not, middle schoolers will throw food down the hallway. I know that's shocking, but we have to do our part. And then 3A is about getting the middle schoolers to clean up after themselves. It's always good to stay hydrated, but sometimes they spray water down the table and we do make them grab a towel and clean up after themselves. So I just wanted to make sure that was in the handbook, so I had something in writing to show the kids, because sometimes there's a little bit of a learning experience there. Page 33, with Mrs. Fink, I revised the breakfast guidelines to reflect what our plan will be for next year. We've kind of bounced back and forth between serving breakfast in the cafeteria and doing a grab-and-go model and kind of tweaking what it looks like, and this is the model that we feel, after some trial and error, works the best at the middle school. So that's been rewritten. Page 34. We have added the prohibition of aerosol deodorants and the like to the middle school. If you have not walked down my math hallway recently, it smells like the perfume counter at JCPenney. Sometimes it's better than smelling what middle schoolers usually smell like, but sometimes they spray these things. It sets off vaping alarms, for example. Sometimes students begin having allergic reactions to things, or they begin sneezing and coughing. Sometimes it's just in the hallway and they're spraying and it's hitting 6 people behind them. So we're trying to crack down on the aerosol. Page 36. This one relates to our lost and found. It used to stop that the lost and found items are simply thrown away. We never really did that, and I don't think we would. But if nothing is claimed at the end of the year, we're going to donate appropriate items to a charitable cause. So that's just written in the handbook. Page 37, we are tidying up our locker procedures. It just expands on some language, I think, to make it a little bit more palatable to the average middle schooler. Just to go back and review what's expected for lockers. It also expands the language surrounding if we have to get into a locker via cutting a lock. That can be for a cause of reasonable suspicion that something may be in there. This most commonly happens because a student gets a lock, forgets to turn a key into the office, and then forgets their key or loses their key, and then we have to cut the lock off. So we just put that in the handbook so parents are also aware, hey, that this might happen, from time to
Does it have it that the doors actually have to close on the lockers?
The doors, so some of the lockers don't actually close. They actually won't latch. The lockers at the middle school are in need of repair, but that's an incredible expense. So we have enough lockers that I believe are functional for everyone to have them.
Okay.
It just becomes an issue using the old locks. Some kids just don't get a knack for it, and there are some that even I can't open without my key. So we do allow kids to get their own locks and do that. But you'll see, I did write into here next year that my expectation is going to be the doors stay as closed as we possibly can, because sometimes it's like pulling teeth. So, yeah.
It's kind of like my kids' room when they don't close.
It just doesn't go. Yeah, we do have some locker banks that are better than others, and I encourage kids to get. They make them like little string locks almost, a little combination. Those are the best, and they're nice and secure, and they keep everything closed. Page 38. Page 38 has to do with obligations, and this was just revised. Everything that was in red, it's almost a copy paste from the policy, but we kind of brought that in to link to the policy, and then just made it a little bit more readable for a middle school audience. So that's what that language is. It's just kind of a tidy up. Page 43. So page 43 connects out-of-school suspensions to make-up work. What we had been doing is following our procedures for make-up work that we had in place for any absence. So on an absence, we have it as the student gets the number of days they were absent plus 1 to make up work. I'd like to keep to that. Usually we don't have anything that is too terribly extreme, thankfully. With out-of-school suspensions, we have seen with the rise of things like marijuana vapes and THC vapes, suspensions that go a little further. Sometimes the students have multiple offenses, let's say for fighting or something along those lines. You might have an OSS period that can last in excess of 3 days. So for example, there have been a few times, unfortunately, at the middle school where we had a student that was suspended nearly 10 days. So they had those 10 days, and if they chose not to do any work, the way the policy or the way our procedures were written, they would have another 10 days plus 1. So you're talking 21 days potentially of either choosing not to do work or having that excessive time. So I talked to teachers, and what we came up with was that if a student is on OSS, they will have, the expectation is that they are working on assignments while they are at home, and then when they come back to school, they can opt to have 2 extra days to get any corrections or assistance done beyond that. That keeps them working during the OSS. It doesn't become like the vacation time if we do have to go that route, and it still allows for time for them to get some help when they come back. I will say, just me personally, if there is a student that needs a little more flexibility, I have no problem working with teachers to make sure that happens. But we didn't want to see like that where it could be over 20 days of not doing schoolwork potentially. Pages 43 to 45, I put a lot of thought into, sorry, I'd like to go back up. It should be page 43. I probably wrote my notes down wrong here. Thank you. These are revisions to vaping infractions. Vaping infractions, we all know, are on the rise in the last number of years. Our present procedures are if it's a nicotine vape and it's not a controlled substance, we do 1 day out of school and charges are filed by our school police officer. First-time offenders do what's called the Impact Project, which is kind of a community service and learning project. What I would like to do as a way to mitigate out-of-school suspensions and also, again, make this into a learning opportunity is for a first offense on a nicotine vape, do a range of in-school suspension, 1 up to 3 days. It's 1 day if you do a learning module about the dangers of vaping. I have that readily available through our partners with Everfi. That was provided by Neff's National Bank with that service. It's a pretty comprehensive module. It's not something you get done in 20 minutes, and it's pretty good. You complete that, you're back within. If you choose not to complete that, the in-school suspension then runs a few other days to kind of send that message home. That is a procedure that is used in some surrounding school districts with other principals that I have networked with. The other procedure that is up there is modifying the response to first-time offenses for controlled substances. Unfortunately, we have had a few of those at the middle school where you have vaping devices that have marijuana or another controlled substance, THC, whatever it might be. Our policy does allow for expulsion for those things at the discretion of the superintendent, and there's a process for that, as we know. What we'd like to do is for first offenses, make that, in lieu of going in expulsion through usually the end of the school year, doing a 10-day OSS learning project, usually probably something through the impact project. That way that student, at least at the middle level, has an opportunity to learn something from it, and that we don't have future infractions. The recidivism rate on students who successfully complete the impact project is almost zero, which is very good, so I'd like to make some investment in there. You have a second offense, then I'm going to Dr. Lincoln, I'm saying, hey, maybe we want to look at the expulsion process for this student. These are the revisions. I'll take any questions.
Are there still fines assigned to them?
There can be. The impact project is done in lieu of fines for first-time offenders. What will happen with the impact project is the school police officer will fill out kind of like the citation, but it's not filed with the magistrate district justice. It's filed with the county agency that does these projects. If the student successfully completes the project, the citation is never formally filed. So it's not a not guilty, it's not a dismissal, it's never filed, it's never there. It's a way to take an offense for a first-time offender and make it into something that's a learning process. You go into a second offense, then it is filed with the magistrate, and then at the magistrate's discretion, it could be a monetary fine. Most commonly, we see something to the effect of between 30 and 60 hours of community service, depending on the circumstances of the infraction.
Have you noticed on any of the infractions that when you bring a parent in, they go, oh, I don't know that my child was doing it? Or is there, yep, I knew Sally was doing it?
It's mixed. The most common thing I hear is that, unfortunately, the student was either sold or given the vape device. Most commonly, I hear that the student tells me they purchased it locally. When I do hear that, I do make a report to the appropriate authorities. There is agencies that look into that. I do know those agencies, though, like any governmental body, are going to be overworked, but it at least is reported appropriately.
I'm all about giving the students the chance, and I'm not loving the change, I'll be honest, because I want them to understand that, and I want them to be in school, and to do that, and sending them out in the streets and doing that, they're just going to go back and do it. So I understand the reason. I'm not sure I'm totally loving the change, but
Which change specifically, Mrs. Suzanne?
just even changing like the in-school suspension or out-of-school suspension or expulsion, those types of conversations. I know we had conversation about it before, and just wrapping my head around it. So if it's the direction that administration feels that that's the way we need to move, just don't like loosening it. Feels like we're going backwards, knowing that, hearing you say first we've had an extensive amount of them. Want to see it change, obviously, and I'm hoping by the education that you're indicating it can change. But then I go, is that education maybe they all should have, and that shouldn't be a. It's almost like that student at some level, for as much as this is going to sound awful, is getting a reward to learn about it. That they should have already. We should be providing that information so that student never does it in the first place. So I'm just.
So
I respect the changes and the choices and the decision to make the changes to the handbook.
I will say
I'd be
for
interested
the nicotine vapes, I do think I'll talk on those first. I think this is going to be the way to go, only because right now the infraction is you're caught, you get the next day off, you come back, and then it goes to an outside agency over which I have no input other than, yes, I support the student doing that. Vaping is covered in our health classes in both 7th and 8th grade. It is covered at the beginning of the year when we do our middle school boot camp activities. We do talk about that, and then at various points throughout the year. I also bring it up with parents at coffee and conversation from time to time. I would rather keep that student in school, making sure they're doing their work, they're not getting the day off, and then that module that I was talking about is something extra on top of what we already do. I don't know what that's exactly going to look like. There is, like I said, there's it's like a 4-part module on Everfi. There are assignments to that. I want to kind of work with some teachers to see if we want to add anything to that. What do we want the assessment part of that to be? And then, because like I said, that way the student can kind of, almost kind of take control of that learning. Am I going to be out, out of classes 3 days, or am I going to be out of classes 1 day? Right now it's 1 day, and you're at home that day. So I think helping there. With the THC vaping, that's what I wrestled with as well. I think I'm looking at it now through the lens of sometimes the person committing the infraction is 12, they're not 17, and I think there's a little bit of a difference there, just my opinion. And I'd like to give that student an opportunity to, let's say this infraction happens in November, not expel the student from November until the end of the year, but do the 10 days for something that's consequential, and then let the impact project do its thing, have the student come back, and understanding you do it again, you're done for that year, or potentially more, depending on what the board would like to do in that case. I just think it's more age appropriate.
I think I have to agree with what his plan is, only because these are middle school kids that are coming into middle school with this, oh, I'm in middle school, I'm cool, I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be like these people, and they're making mistakes, getting caught, realizing consequences. You're gonna give them consequences, they're gonna have to do these things, but they're also being given an opportunity to correct the mistake and do better. Now, of course, there's continued consequences if they continue the pattern, so therefore, if they're gonna continue doing that, then they're gonna get even worse. I mean, we talk about the expulsions, how we see so many of them, and we're like, gosh, now these kids are at home. If they're at home, who knows what they're doing at home? Mom and dad are probably still at work, and they're just left to just sit there and do whatever they want. So I like the idea of keeping them in school, giving them assignments, making them do those things, and then that 10-day, like, give them a chance to correct. Because people can make mistakes. They need opportunities to try to correct and do better.
And the reality of the expulsion is 9 times out of 10, the academic placement falls to Bulldog Academy. Bulldog Academy is not for everyone. So sometimes, in most cases actually, if a student and a family are not choosing to go into Bulldog Academy, and it's kind of the only option that they have because there might not be another educational placement, the academics take a hit now. So now you have a punitive hit based on the infraction coupled with perhaps a lack of academic improvement. I don't want to see that at a foundational level.
Right, and anything that's going on in that kid's environment at home, their self-esteem and everything, it's just spiraling them down. It's not giving them an opportunity to correct, learn from mistakes, and improve.
Is there an SAP referral done as well?
Yes.
Okay, and then do they go through an assessment? An alcohol drug assessment?
Yes, so that through the expulsion process that is done, and that would still be my recommendation for that. And
For the initial one time?
Correct. That would go through automatically. Anything that's vape-related goes to the SAP team. And then the SAP team evaluates how we want to work with the family to make a recommendation. In that 10 days, a DNA assessment would be guaranteed, the recommendation of the SAP team. As part of the expulsion process, usually, I won't say usually, always, the ones I've written with Dr. Link, that's been a parameter, a condition of return. It's this many days, and student must complete
DNA assessment.
A DNA assessment or some type of counseling that the family.
But the first time you're saying it's a recommendation of the SAP team to decide whether they want to do that or not.
recommendation of the SAP team would be to assist the family in getting the drug and alcohol.
Okay.
I don't know, at that point, we would not, the way this is written, we would not keep them out of school until that is done.
Understand.
Okay, but it would be.
Yeah, obviously it's a
yeah.
scheduling issue.
Yes, it would be the recommendation of the SAP team for the parent to go through that SAP process.
Right.
And I will say too, depending on the information we get as far as the origin of that vaping device, can determine whether or not children and youth is involved, things of that nature.
Mr. Hauser, if this infraction was commingled with another level 4 infraction, but it was the first time for the vape, what would the recommended consequence be?
I think at that point, you and I are discussing expulsion. This seems to be, the way I understand this is, first time offense of a level 4 infraction. You start mixing multiple level 4 infractions together, you're not talking a one size fits all here for that first offense.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir.
From past experience, I'm going to turn back to our elementary. Did our elementary handbook change to incur some of these changes? I believe there was a 6th grader at one point in time.
There was.
So my question is, if we're changing parameters at the middle school because it's a foundation level, what are we doing at the elementary schools because it's happening there too?
Currently, or what?
So
Currently, we're
it wasn't
following what we
changed.
have been doing.
So then if you guys are doing that, then I'm concerned that this is 5th and 6th grade, 4th grade is just as foundational as 7th and 8th grade. That if we're doing it for one, then we should be doing it for the other, or vice versa. I personally don't think that if we're saying 7th and 8th grade is the foundation level, that we either don't make the change or we make the change. Where personally, I don't love that they're different.
Yeah, I don't love the.
Well, I agree, I think it should be K to 12.
I agree. I
Yeah.
think it should be
And
all around.
I'm okay with that. I'd rather
That
see it.
model,
Yes.
that model, K to 12.
I'd rather see it the same versus kids in, there could be 2 students from the same family in 2 different buildings getting 2 different
Right.
things, which
It
doesn't
wouldn't
make sense. So if we're okay with whichever plan we choose, my personal opinion is that all the handbooks match. But that's just
I
from
do
this
think the
lens.
way the policy is written, it already allows for that, because there's discretionary guidance in there, and I want to speak for Dr. Lincoln, excuse me, but there's discretionary with the consequences. I put it into the middle school handbook because it's becoming more common, and that way it's in black and white. I know the parents now are getting it from multiple sources. I can count on one hand probably the amount of parents that actually read policy versus the number of parents that will at least peruse a handbook. So that's why I wanted it in there. So I think our policy already allows for it, it's just
It's
now
good.
application. Yeah.
Then I think they all should be the same. That I'm not disagreeing with you. I can guarantee you as a parent, if I wasn't on the school board, I wouldn't be looking at policy 10 something and 200 and 300 and 600 and
Light
whatever.
reading.
But I'm gonna find it in the handbook.
Correct.
So I'm good, I'm okay with that, but then I think the verbiage, to your point, should be the same, because now you have a parent who's reading it in one building that may also be reading it in a different building and interpreting it 2 different ways.
Sure.
Even though we believe it's the same. That's just my opinion on that particular portion. That's a big change, even though it's not a big change. It's a big change to have it written the way that it's written, which is,
The other buildings, I will request royalties if you use.
I'm gonna pay.
wow.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but I'm not an elementary person. I was never engaged in elementary school and handling those little children. I'm very familiar with middle school, and I understand exactly where you're coming from. I don't know developmentally, though, if the same fit is there. That's just my feelings.
That was
I
the
understand
question.
consistency, though.
I do not want to expel an elementary child.
Correct.
My concerns that Mr. Hauser has with them being at home, for a disciplinary reason, for potentially a quarter, a semester, for me are actually amplified from somebody in K through 6. So I agree. I mean, I think it should be changed in the elementary building levels. I don't know why we would put a 9-year-old out if we're not going to do it for 12-year-olds. Almost. Go on. Mr. Schneiderite, Mr. Reiner?
No, I agree with you. I you know, and for that logic too. I mean, how can you be firmer is not the right word because this is firm, and I think it's just a different way of being firm. But that, you know, antiquated, old. You know, like we can't follow one thing, go here, and then, you know, even at the high school level, go back. So, you know, there needs to be consistency because we open ourselves up when we're not being consistent. That's my case. I mean, I understand where Mr. Hauser's coming from a standpoint of volume. You know, I've dealt with this one time in 3 years. He deals with it at a much higher level than I do, although we know it's starting at my building.
Sure.
You know, it's just maybe not inside as much.
So that was the only other consideration I had, which I think might have been like sort of where you were going with that, is that I never dealt with it in all the years that I was at Slating's Elementary School. Regular nicotine vape once or twice. I don't know if there's also an implicit message there, putting it in the handbook, that there is a problem, that there is not an actuality. And it's not to say that we wouldn't respond that way, right? But like I think there's a number of things that we may address differently based on the developmental level of the students in the handbook. So that's the only thing I'm thinking as like we're thinking through this is, if this isn't actually something that occurs more than once a decade, right? Or, and who knows, it could happen more and more. You know, is it something that we want to put language in the handbook, if only just because it feels out of place for an 8-year-old to read the handbook about a THC vape, right? Like, so that's the only.
So I just want to clarify, the one issue that I was saying about was a nicotine vape. It was not a THC vape or anything else. But the second thing that I would say, and just kind of pushing back on that point a little bit, is you could say that about anything that's written in the handbook. You know, are we implying that we have a DNA information in the handbook, and you know, are we implying that there's an issue? No, we're informing that this is kind of what we do. So, I mean, I see where you're coming from, and maybe Mr. Schneiderite has a different opinion, you know, especially being even younger kids or dealing with younger kids. But I feel like you could pull anything out of that and say, oh, well, you have a lice problem because it's written in your handbook. You know, so.
I don't know. Great discussion.
Don't start
right?
itching. Shelly's over here. Sorry, it's one of the updated things on our list. But.
So what is the major difference between elementary and middle school? Just what are some major differences that we're concerned about? Like, how do you handle it? Let's go back to that.
How would I handle it?
Yeah.
You know, it would be a nicotine vape. It would be a day of out of school suspension. It would be a referral to SAP. It would then be a recommendation for an eval. Well, there'd be a citation depending upon how old they are.
Right.
And then out of that, we'd go from there.
Right.
So we'd handle it the exact same way that they have been handling it, and that's my point of like,
Right.
if we're going to this, we've all got to go.
Mr. Kern, in my building, in 5 years, I've never once worked with a student who was actively using, but I have had experiences where they brought them in
Sure.
because they didn't know what they were.
I was gonna say that.
There were consequences, but a lot of time we're looking at it more from the children and youth aspect
Correct.
of how did
Again, that's my
how
point.
are they allowed
Age
to bring that
appropriate
into
discipline, and let's not get away from that. I like the flexibility of an elementary school having a little bit more on how to deal with different issues, because you know the families. You know the families are coming from. you know, where the issue is, which I think has a big impact in elementary. A little bit more peer pressure in middle school, you know, a little bit more. Not much in 6th grade, maybe, I don't know. I just don't want us to get ourselves tied into, you know, disciplining kids the same way at different age levels, because society doesn't do it. And I don't think we should do it as a school district either. I like the flexibility. I'm not a concrete and sequential guy, even with discipline, because every discipline issue is different. You know, there are factors. I understand about the vaping, and it's an issue, and we gotta attack it seriously. And I do like the educational part. Even though they do get it in health classes, I was a health teacher, to nauseam. It's taught from K to 12. So, and still doesn't resonate with some kids, but it's still illegal. And that's the bottom line. So we gotta deal with it that way. As far as elementary, I don't know. I'm not an elementary guy, that's why I don't know. You know, you got a 10-year-old sitting across from you how to vape. Am I gonna punish that kid the same way I'm gonna punish a 13 or 14-year-old? I'm not sure I am. That's all I'm saying. I like the flexibility. So that's just my opinion.
So would you say you would give them an in-school suspension versus an out-of-school suspension?
I don't mind the out-of-school suspension depending on the circumstances. Absolutely not.
I'm just thinking, like, you know, in terms of how do you lessen the discipline in that area, or not so much lessen it, but how do you, you know, as it creeps up to that level, where do you nip it in the bud?
I don't know.
So one thing to consider is the hierarchy of consequences and what is where.
Right.
Both an in-school and an out-of-school are considered exclusionary discipline.
Right.
So that they're equal on that footing. I think I think we should use the out-of-school suspension when the situation warrants the student cannot be in the building. For example, if I have students who get into a fight in the cafeteria and it's an equal mutual fight thing, I do 3 days out of school for both of them for nothing else than to cool off, because time heals all wounds, okay, and it helps. I think if you bring a controlled substance into school, now you're a threat to your own safety and the safety of others. You bring a weapon into school, you're a threat to your
But
own
when you
safety
bring
of
those
others.
kids back, you just don't throw them right back in the fold. There's a conference with somebody
Yes,
as a way of re-entering the building.
We do conferences at the middle school. We do post-suspension conferences for in-school and out-of-school suspension. Most of the time, it's done on an in-school the same day.
So
the
that's
end
that
of the day.
educational piece that I'm trying to say.
Correct. I don't think bringing a nicotine vape, if we had no other alternatives, if in-school suspension could not be covered, could not be monitored, then yes, you have to go to an out-of-school suspension. We've been at that situation at the middle school. I think right now we have the ability to take that infraction and make it that 1 to 3 day threshold that I'm talking about if you attach the educational component. And you're also putting some ownership into the kids' hands too, a little bit, which is good. Teach them some responsibility. Okay, I can do this learning piece and lessen with the consequences.
Right,
you
and
know,
we're
so I
not
think
gonna
that's
give that
valuable.
learning piece to the, you know, kindergarten and, you know, through 6th. Well, that's 6th graders and 5th graders and 4th graders could do a more lesson version of that, I'm sure, you know, not so intense, but.
And there are other, you know, I'm not really familiar with what Mr. Hauser's discussing in terms of what the modules look like, but I know that there's other modules that we have access to through CHC. You know, typically from a suspension standpoint, to answer your question, Mr. Kern, you know, I do everything I can to probably keep kids in school, to do it in school as best as I can when it comes to suspensions. Sometimes at my level, it comes, you know, if a student has proven that they can't be successful in an in-school suspension, then it would be an out-of-school suspension. But in terms of rising to that level, a lot of times, very similar to Mr. Hauser, is the safety aspect of it, right? So like, part of that becomes, you know, if they are in a fight, or if they're bringing a weapon to school, obviously, they're going out for more than just that. You know, a vape has been in the past. But I like this model, and I agree with you. I think we try to be as flexible as we can, and I agree from the standpoint that there's no such thing as black and white when it comes to discipline.
So what did we decide?
I didn't start smoking until 3rd grade, so I don't know. Times change.
I recommend you keep the language similar in each handbook, K to 12. I trust my principals to make individualized decisions within their discretion, but I also know that whenever they come, either Dr. Soker or myself with one of these, we have a series of questions that we ask them, that usually leads with, have you had this happen before? Is it a student with an IEP? Is it we had this conversation, I think, earlier today. Is it a white student or a black student? Are you treating the white student differently than you're treating the black student or the student of color? We have a series of protocols that we go through when we make these decisions. I do think we can set expectations in black and white, regardless of age. Our expectations are, don't bring a vape to our schools. Right? That's the expectation. When they don't meet that expectation, I think the language in our handbook should be the same, but I trust our school principals to make appropriate decisions when you're dealing with individual children.
Agreed. Anything else? All right, Mr. Hauser, you blew the whole evening.
For my next can of worms.
Is there anything else that is important to go over with handbook changes?
Handbook is finished, however, my curriculum guide is next.
Wonderful news.
So I've revised the entire document. I'm kidding. So again, general word fixes and aesthetics throughout. I won't explain those, throughout. Page 3, Dr. Stoker. Some of these changes are for both 7th and 8th grade, so you might see a little bit of redundancy here. Page 3 has a revision to our essential skills and financial literacy class. That class is expanding away from being an encore in a single quarter to a semester-based class. Mrs. Jones is going to be teaching that, and she'll be bringing in a lot of what she has done with our partnership with CFES, College and Career for Every Student. That will be coming into the class, and so we just reflected those changes. And then the credit value goes up by that extra quarter as well. Page 4, Dr. Stoker. All right, so on page 4, part of the scheduling adjustment that we had to do meant that if you expand one class to a semester, you have to marry it to another one that also expands for a semester. And we felt the most logical thing to do here was synthesize health and PE. There's really not a lot of change other than how it's reported, because health and PE presently, while 2 separate classes, run in consecutive quarters. So it's really just keeping what's already there and just putting a new name on it. So those things were synthesized, basically the descriptions were synthesized, and that change applies to both 7th and 8th grade. Pages 6 and 7, Dr. Stoker. 6 and 7, you'll see the description for goal team changing a bit. In our new schedule, we are merging the periods that were called goal team, enrichment, and brilliant pathways into one period, and that's because the block days that we have in our schedule will no longer be there. So the functions of those periods are just merging into one. So taking the same language, not losing any content, just synthesizing it under a single title. And again, that will be the same for both 7th and 8th grades. Page 9, Dr. Stoker. So the top part there is that merger for health and PE, but for 8th grade, down into Intro to Spanish. That's the class at the 8th grade level that's being married to health and PE to accommodate the semester change. So you'll see there, one of the ways we're moving from a 45-day course to a 90 course is putting a little bit more emphasis not only on language, but also the culture of Spanish-speaking countries. So we're learning more, just cultural things as opposed to the language. And you'll see the credit adaptation there as well. And then finally, page 11, this is simply the goal team, a little more down, Dr. Stoker. Thank you. This is simply the goal team synthesis for 8th grade as we had for 7th grade. I will take any questions. Thank you, everyone.
High school.
And we have a high
That's
school. Mr. Stroll.
Thank you, Dr. Stoker. Thank you, Mr. Kern. Thank you, everybody. Good evening. First of all, I want to thank Dr. Bali for revamping the high school student handbook from last year, because we had about 50 different types of formats in our old one. So she really went through extensively. So we don't have as many changes as Mr. Hauser, but we might. So page one. Page one and throughout, you'll see that the school year changes from 2023 to 2024 to 2024, 2025, and then we also have a new logo on the front cover as well. Page 9, Dr. Stoker, please. On page 9, you'll see staffing and school board member changes. The changes indicate that the faculty is no longer in that position, and then the new one is in yellow. Page 10, please. Page 10, well, formatting and adding some graphics in here, it got a little wonky, but we changed the Northern Lehigh School District calendar update to 2024-2025 to reflect what is on our website. Page 12, please. You'll see that our regular schedule has changed and it reflects the recent Lunch and Learn. We'll dive a little bit into that in a little bit, but I can just say, right now we have homeroom, blocks 1, and there's a 4-minute transition between homeroom and block 1. Block 1 is 80 minutes, 4-minute transition. Block 2 is 80 minutes, 4-minute transition to lunch for 1 hour lunch and learn. 4-minute transition to block 3 for 80 minutes, 4-minute transition to block 4 for 80 minutes, and then the end of the day dismissal time is 2:10, which is the same as this year. Scroll down a little bit more, you'll see that our LCTI times have changed. Again, what we discussed earlier, AM LCTI will be leaving at about 7:30. They'll be coming back for the second portion of our Lunch and Learn. And then they will go to block 3, which is changed from this year and in years past. Those students going in AML-CTI had a 1-year-long, we'll call it social studies class, whereas now they'll have a full block. So they'll actually gain graduation credit rather than having that one period of class all year long. And then our PML-CTI students will leave at, I'm getting old, about 11:20, and then they'll return later in the day at about between 3 and 3:10. Scroll down a little bit more, Dr. Stoker. We do have a 2-hour delay schedule there with our lunch and learn still in the 2-hour delay schedule. With our periods, or I should say blocks, modified a little bit shorter. If you could go to pages 43 through 45, please. There we have extracurricular additions, so new clubs, new advisors, and then the changing of those new clubs and new advisors as well. For example, our senior class advisors, Mrs. Wilder and Mrs. Dunn, who did a phenomenal job with all things graduation and seniors this year. They're no longer in that role, so now the new senior class for next year will be Dr. Gonzalez and Mr. Lucari. If you could scroll down to page 52 and 53, please. And 53 are updates to our lunch from Mrs. Fink. And then if you could scroll to 54, we will have page 54. So right now at the high school we have grab and go breakfast, but it's at 2 ends of the building. So grab and go in the library lobby, grab and go bag breakfast is in the main lobby at the gym. We're changing that next year because we due to staffing scheduling with the lunch and learn, we're going to need our cafeteria cafeteria workers there during lunch and learn. So what we're doing is we're opening up, we're having grab and go breakfast still, but in the cafeteria. Both lines are open. We piloted it today, and it was phenomenal. Only one, we asked the teachers to collect data, not discipline data today. Only one student was late, and typically they roam the halls. So it is a pattern of behavior that we see, but out of 86 plus the ones that were late to school, we had about 105 breakfasts grabbed this morning in our first pilot of the grab and go down in the cafeteria. So it was a success. Thank you to administration who came to facilitate that. Any questions about the high school student handbook?
Very good.
All right. Thank you.
Excuse me.
We'd be looking for the board members present for allowing us to move these to next Monday for a vote. What we'll do is we'll take the discussion from tonight, we'll go back and clean up all of what you've seen. So everything that's been taken out will be removed, and then everything that's been added it'll look like a clean copy for the board meeting. So do we have the ability to do that?
Yep.
Okay. Thank you very much.
KinderQuest.
KinderQuest. So Dr. Stoker will be putting up on a very short presentation, but just really to guide a brief conversation. I know you've heard it. Dr. Linka mentioned it this evening. I'm sure Dr. Stoker's mentioned it in the her weekly meetings. We've been speaking about it for quite a while. I'm putting together a program that's going to begin this summer called KinderQuest. I want to give Dr. Jennifer Butz the kudos for the name. We initially started to try to find ways to make it dog-like. Kinder Kennel and things like that. It just didn't feel right. And again, boot camp didn't seem like appropriate for 5, 6, and 7-year-olds. But I love the idea of KinderQuest. If you can go to the next slide, Dr. Stoker. I think it perfectly encapsulates our motto: living, learning, and leading to make every story better. And how I've been reaching out to parents. We hope that your children will begin their quest with us this August before kindergarten starts. So I'm going to share with you, if you can go to the next slide, please, Dr. Stoker. I'm going to share with you, just about the program, some structural things, and of course answer any questions. So a very brief overview. It's going to be a 3-day program, Tuesday, August 6th through Thursday, August 8th. That Monday is going to be a day of preparation for the teachers and the powers that are going to work at the program. During those 3 days, it'll be at 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. Transportation will be provided to students. It seems like not that many students are opting into that, or parents are opting into that. Right now we've got 48 total families, and just about 50% of them are choosing to transport themselves, probably just because they're nervous, because their children, some of them are 4 years old still, going to be 5 by the time school starts. Students will receive lunch each day. It's not going to be a hot lunch, but it's going to be very similar to what we do for field trips. They're going to choose between a number of different bag lunch options. But there's a reason we're doing lunch, because it's not just a food reason, it's also a teaching reason. And the program will be offered to all incoming kindergarten students. Next slide, please. So the purpose of the program is twofold. Number one is a student focus, right? It's to ease the transition for students. If you've ever experienced as a parent or a recent educator, the first 2 to 3 weeks of kindergarten especially is a big challenge. It's a big challenge for students because for many of them it's their first time, out of home and into something new. The hope is that these 3 days will help ease the transition. They'll be working with our staff. They'll meet their principal, their school counselor. They'll, ideally, many of them will ride the bus. They'll eat in our cafeterias. And the first week, it's almost like it could be a shocking experience. The idea in a very low, not for 7 hours a day, but just for 3 hours a day in a low, stress environment, get them a chance to come into the building and learn about it. We're going to do building tours on the first day and just really get them familiar with Welcome to Peters. But there's a second and a very big benefit to our staff as well. I'll tell you, for those of you who have ever been in the elementary school realm, especially with kindergarten is the most challenging because we can't really prepare very much for it. Even with first graders who've been in the school district for a year or less than if they've transitioned in, We don't know them for 12 years. We haven't done 12 years of data and interventions that have been tried, but we at least have a year. So when we're scheduling first grade, we have an idea, right? When students are coming into kindergarten, we have very little idea. A lot of it's parent input. Some students may be coming in with maybe an early intervention IEP, or they did the kindergarten registration, which during that, their parents bring them in. We basically pull them aside for 20 minutes with somebody they've never met and go, what letter is this? Let's count to 12. And that, again, is a very stressful situation. And a lot of times they don't respond at all. They just stare at you and, so it's like, let's get to see them in action. So when we bring them in, we're going to be looking to, teach them our school-wide expectations with the focus of, the areas that need the most teaching. I'll tell you, it takes about 3 weeks to get kindergarten lunch just to function normally. There's a lot of strategies that go into it. Okay, we're going to call it a table at a time, and the students don't remember who their teacher is or what table is, and it's a very chaotic experience at the beginning. We're going to have our teachers there instead of eating lunch, practicing those strategies that we use throughout the day in hopes that that'll make it a lot easier for them at the beginning of the school year. Recess. There's a lot of teaching that happens throughout the 3 years at Peters at recess. Not just how to use the equipment, but how to socialize and how to work with each other, with other students, and how to say please and thank you, and how to ask for a ball instead of grabbing it. Things of that nature. And we're going to have our teachers out there playing with them, in this structured setting, but teaching them as well. So there's going to be a lot of teaching that's going on, as well as that transition benefit. Next slide, please. So over those 3 days, here's a highlight of the basically daily agenda. Learning and practicing school-wide expectations, classrooms, hallways, cafeteria, recess, bathrooms, and buses. We spend 3 years doing this. We consistently work on expectations, but this way, again, it'll ease the transition of them knowing where that bathroom is on that first day and not being comfortable going there. They're going to have teachers to be able to bring them there, show them how it works, and not show them how the bathroom works, but show them how the process works to go to the bathroom. This way it'll make it easier for them once they do get here. They'll be engaging in some fine motor activities appropriate for kindergarten students. We're not going to be teaching them ABCs and 1, 2, 3s, but we want to give them some sort of challenge to see how they react to it. The idea, I was speaking to a kindergarten teacher today, perhaps doing, with each group, doing a daily project. Let's cut and create something. We get to see them color and trace and cut. And, those things as adults are very easy because we've been doing it for, many years. With a 5-year-old who's coming new into kindergarten, that's their first adversity. And if they struggle with it, we get a chance to see how they struggle with it so that we can help them better once they're in our school. There'll be daily social skills lessons. Our school counselor will be actively a part of it. And, many of the things will be happening in both small group and, again, whole group as we do lunch lessons, recess lessons, etc. And my penultimate slide, please. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm looking at mine now. So here's some updates on basically where we are now. Right now, we are around 105 fully enrolled in kindergarten, with about 10 other families that are in the process of, sharing, their information with us and going through that registration process. Right now, 100 families have expressed interest in the program, which is fantastic. It's almost everybody. I've reached out to them 2 times now, working through some email challenges. As of this morning, actually it's now 48 confirmed participants. 1 since we shared this with you last Friday has now confirmed participation. The plan moving forward is continued communication as parents enroll their child, directly communicating to them about this program. And the hope is that, if I had to take a guess, my guess is probably 60 plus. 60 to 80 is my guess, and I think that's, to be honest, 47 is great. We'll take 47 because it's 47 more than we had last year. And then again, updates as the start nears. So my plan is in about 2 or 3 weeks to start emailing the parents who've confirmed and talking about the enrollment into school. So that's my update, and again, we're looking forward to those soon-to-be Peters pups to start their quest with us in August. So, any questions or feedback anyone would like to ask or share?
Yeah, sorry. I know we've had all the issues at Peters this year with the discipline issues. Will this help make that better?
I think in a number of ways. Number one, the knowledge is power. Information is power, right? Again, one of the challenges we have is scheduling kindergarten because it literally is male, female. We try to keep a 50-50 ratio and total number in the class. But we don't get a chance to see the students in action. The planning of this being the first week in August, that is prior to us as a school sharing out classroom assignments with families. So if we notice, because there are some times where within a classroom, we might have students that don't get along very well. There's sometimes there's socialization challenges within a class, and sometimes you have a teacher with none. Now, going up to a kindergarten teacher or kindergarten parent the first a month into school and say, I'm changing your child's teacher is a challenge because they're 5. But now we can sort of hopefully prevent some of that. And as I say to the kindergarten teachers, we're looking to balance everything. So the hope is that the more students that come in, we're going to be able to balance the schedules better than we've ever had to, because again, it's like darts on a wall. You're just taking guesses. And it's funny because most parents who communicate with me over the summer, most of them have the same message. Oh, you're my kid, and a lot of the parents are jokey about it, but nobody knows, right? A lot of times they're coming from home, they're coming into a school, this is their first time in a school-wide setting, and everybody's taking a guess. So we're going to get a chance to, at least for 3 days, get a chance to see them in action, and that'll help us sort of plan ahead a little bit better. And I think, especially since we're jumping in with immediate social skills, immediate work with our teachers on those teaching of the expectations, because when you've got a class of 23 kids and parent emails and all the things the first week of school, you're meeting the contract and you've got to go to lunch when they're at lunch. Who's teaching that? It's me and the 2 CAF monitors or whoever else is in there. Now it's the teachers teaching it in the summer, which will be an added benefit as well.
Just because we've all read the updates and stuff, and we see the volume, so obviously what we're doing now is not working. So I would hope to see something put in place for this coming school year that would be different than what we're doing right now.
Sure.
I really don't want to see that each week that we're hearing, that the police officer had to intervene so many times.
Agreed.
So I would just hope that would change going forward.
I agree.
Mr. Green?
The question I was going to ask is, maybe not for the whole 3 days, but have you thought at all about like new students who are coming for the first time, perhaps having them come in maybe for the first day for a tour, so they could find out where the cafeteria is, the bathroom is, and get to know their area. Okay, so they're 6 now instead of 5, but they're still little kids, and it still could be a scary thing coming in the first day.
I actually do spend a lot of time in the summer giving tours to families.
Oh, you do?
Those are usually handled one-on-one. The benefit of this program is, and not that it certainly wouldn't benefit those students from learning it, but I'm focusing on having the kindergarten teachers who will be their teachers. We're not telling them who the teacher is yet, but that will be their teachers teaching that. But certainly something we can consider. Right now, we don't know who that is because nobody's enrolled that isn't currently here, but if it comes to the time, it depends on staffing, it depends on availability of buses and lunches and all those kind of things, but that's certainly something we can consider, but usually, typically, I spend a lot of the time in the summer inviting parents in, bringing their students around, showing them around, this is going to be your classroom, kind of things, and walking them through.
Very good, thank you.
Great, thanks, Mr. Green.
Question here. Great idea, great concept. You're getting ahead of the curve. It's wonderful. How did you get our educators or counselor to volunteer? Are we paying them?
Oh, we're paying them.
Okay. And that comes out of where? How are we paying for that?
So we have some grant monies that
Okay.
we're using for like.
And I'm not, believe my question isn't to downgrade what you're doing. I'm just trying to figure out how we're paying for it.
Yep.
Yeah, for some of the SEL types of responsibilities that we have, that's written into some of the grants, and then in the future it would be into the Peters budget.
Okay. Because I imagine busing would be a little bit expensive because they're all over. Could be all over.
I think they're being creative with it because they're not picking up at every, they're setting bus stops.
Oh,
we've
okay,
actually
very
already
good.
begun the process of,
All right.
even though the Power School rollover hasn't, been able to, it's not ready yet because they're not in our system, they're not our students yet. But Mr. Wanamaker found some kind of workaround where we can actually start rostering them so we can see what those bus routes could look like. The challenge is we want to give the parents that are incoming the opportunity to sign up, even if they enroll a week before, but we might not be able to get them on a bus. You know, and what, you know, we've also had the communication of, oh, well, if you can get them to this bus stop 3 blocks away, you know, because again, there's no limit other than staffing. And right now we're looking to staff it for what we know is going to be there with the preparing for what could be.
Well, kudos to the staff.
Great.
For giving up 3 days of their summer to come in and I think a worthwhile project.
Yep.
So,
I think they see the value in it as well.
right.
So,
Kudos.
great, thanks. Any
Anybody
other
else?
questions or feedback? Okay, thanks.
All right. Lunch and learn update. You got 2 minutes.
Okay. Thanks.
Sorry, Mike.
That's okay. So the Lunch and Learn Committee continues to meet weekly. We analyze staff surveys, student surveys, and so here's what our schedule is proposed that we've discussed with our teachers and our upper administration. Contractually, Teachers' Day is still the same, 7 o'clock till 2:20. Student Day is still the same as well. So the doors open at 7:05. But then they'll have the grab-and-go breakfast like I shared earlier. Homeroom is 12 minutes, 7:18 to 7:30. We think that's vital because we do have some important morning announcements and things like that our students are involved in the dog dish, and so they're really working hard to communicate all things Northern Lehigh and community to those students. 4-minute transition between homeroom and block 1 again, 80 minutes, and then 4 minutes to block 2, 80 minutes. 4 minutes to transition to lunch and learn, which is 60 minutes, and then you have to remember that lunch and learn is split for teachers' lunches. Some teachers will have A lunch, some teachers will have B lunch. So when teachers don't have their B lunch, they're available for learn during the part A. That will be communicated on their doors of when they're available, when they have lunch, and also when their building operations time is, so that they can be available during that time as well. 4 minutes to block 3, 80 minutes in block 3, 4 minutes to block 4, 80 minutes in block 4, and then dismissal for students is 2:10, and then 2:20 for teachers. Breakfast, I already shared that. Would you like me to go over that one more time? Okay. And then the communication plan. So we've been meeting with students face to face and also taking Google Form surveys. They within lunches we've stopped lunches and we've made announcements to the students in all 3 lunches several times. Study halls, they know that they're getting more autonomy. I think that they want it. They are like, wow, you're going to trust us. So I think it's like a sort of a natural intrinsic motivation to, not do anything that wouldn't, that you won't wind up in lunch detention, or take that away, that part away from them. Students are understanding that the need for being responsible for academic and social behavior. So are they acting appropriately in the hallways? Are they cleaning up after themselves? Again, we have that supervision that will be rotating around everywhere. So we'll be monitoring that. We actually have sort of piloted in small samples of students, like the dual enrollment students have sort of been piloting this in the library. They're eating and they're learning in their dual enrollment courses at the same time, and it looks like an organic, an experience. They're happy, they're excited, they're learning and eating at the same time. So thank you to Mrs. Tiedemann who facilitates that. We've also between our with our new Keystone testing schedule, we have a break between Module 1 and Module 2 now, and we piloted sort of what the lunch would look like outside, not necessarily in the building because there's other classes that are running. So we piloted the lunch outside, and it worked well. We just had a couple of carrots being thrown to rabbits or something, but that's what they said. We also just had our ninth grade orientation. Our 8th graders came over. We had stations, one about scheduling, small group stations, one about scheduling in an area, one about the building layout, questions and discussion, and then one of them was about lunch and learn. So, Dr. Bali and Mr. McCarty headed that up, and I think that the students, they'll be prepared. We do have a plan coming into next year to stagger lunches sort of in the beginning of the year, just to go over those expectations so that not all the students, because the students aren't necessarily going to be scheduled no, students they come in with a clean slate, so no one's doing poorly that we know of, with our data. So we're going to stagger lunches so that they're not really like everybody's down at the lunch cafeteria at the same time. Although, our cafeteria aides workers are doing a phenomenal job. That we know, so thanks to them. We've, our communication plan. Again, the orientation. We have, been sharing this out at Coffee and Conversation. Written communication multiple times throughout the summer that Dr. Bali has planned. Open house we have planned. We also have links to our sample videos. I believe that we may have showed them here. And then we do have, our staffing plan. It's completed, and we'll continue to revise and reflect, make changes as needed. But our staff and students both have laid out expectations of what this model looks like. And thank you to everybody who's been supporting us at the building level and within the community too. Any questions about Lunch and Learn update?
I'll just say it's been interesting to see the pilots, right? So we're kind of practicing all these little pieces, and it's going to obviously come together in the fall when everything kind of takes off and Lunch and Learn is moving ahead. But it's nice to see all of the little components and how well they're running already.
I'm glad to see you're addressing the beginning of the year too, just like you said.
Yeah.
Students don't have a need to go somewhere right away, so
Yeah.
so you're taking that opportunity to really kind of nail what the expectations are, so that's good.
Yeah. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, EF tours.
Yep. Just continue to keep everybody abreast of what's happening. I'm pleasantly surprised by how things have been going so far. Our initial enrollment ended on May 31st. That was the deadline for families to get $100 off the national parks or $200 off of the Italy trip. Remember that we're running U.S. National Parks in 2025. I believe we have 15 students. Is that correct? 15 students. Miss Dunham is running that one. And then 2026, we have Roma Perugia. We have 57 students currently for that one. And that's Mrs. Jones. That's going to be the leader of that one. That actually opens us up at this point to a second tour that we can run at the same time. So that was the conversation I wanted to have here at Education Committee, is that we have the U.S. National Parks will be running next summer, but 2 summers from now we can actually run 2 buses. They would have 2 leaders and multiple chaperones. For the domestic trips, it would be 1 chaperone for every 10. For the overseas trips, it's 1 chaperone for every 6. So I'll talk a little bit more about future considerations, but I'm bringing to the board today, are you comfortable with us for the Italy trip running 2 kind of joint groups at the same time? We have a lot of interest in both of these trips right now.
The presentation was fantastic. There was a huge turnout by our students and families, which was amazing to see. Ms. Dunham and Mrs. Jones did a fantastic job talking about the tours that they're going to be doing. So Madeline's going. Any surprise to that, Mrs. Dunham? But no, it was fantastic to see, and to see that much support. Some of our students will never leave Slatington, let alone have the ability to safely leave the country. And being able to provide that, I think, is a great opportunity for our students.
And I do have to say, Mrs. Jones and Ms. Dunham are the reason that it is so successful at this point. I mean, they put a lot of work into having presentation boards and getting flyers out and getting the word out to families. So it really comes back to the 2 of them and the hard work that they put in to get the communication out there to families. So there's a lot of excitement about it. Some of the future considerations are, we're looking at policies and procedures for trips. We got this obviously up and running pretty quickly. We want to make sure that we have policy and procedures in place for how things are going to run. Some of those in particular are, overseas students could potentially drink underage. We don't want them to drink underage because that's not what we allow here in the district. So we want to make sure some of those rules that we have here carry with them on their trips. We talked about vaping and things like that. We want to make sure that some of those same things that we expect here at school on any field trip will also carry overseas on those field trips as well. So we're looking to put some of those types of things in place. fundraising and affordability for families. So we're looking at what types of fundraisers we may do. We've had a lot of really good conversations about raising money to bring down the cost of the trip for families. We're also, Mrs. Molatoris looked in with our auditors to ways that we need to make sure that we document all of the money that we're fundraising and how we attribute that to each of the individual students who's done that have done that fundraising, so that those students get credit for the money that they have raised, and so that that trip lessens for them. So we have to, certain ways that we have to keep records for that, so we will be doing that. The training of the leaders, so any of our leaders, that would be Ms. Dunham, Mrs. Jones, and Mrs. Crucial, who will eventually be leading our trips, will actually go out and experience those trips prior to leading them. So there'll be some trainings coming up for each of the people that will be one of those leaders on the trips. And then once we get to the point where we feel that we have a solid number of families or students that are in this, because it can fluctuate. People, jump into the trips, people jump out of the trips, circumstances change. So we're really looking for that number to kind of stabilize. And once it does, then we'll be selecting the chaperones at those ratios that we talked about. 10 for our domestic and 6 for overseas. So we have a lot of interest in chaperones, a lot of people that are looking to do those trips along with our students, and with various contents, bring that knowledge to those educational experiences as well. Any questions on that?
Yes, just refresh me. This is trips during the summer?
During the summer, correct. They give us a window in the summer, so they don't have the exact dates, and they narrow that down as we get closer to that. But families can register from now up to 3 months before the trip. Obviously, they'd have more money to pay as they get closer because the money would be coming due, but we're trying to expand that over time. And they give you a window, and once they can book everything, then they narrow that window down.
Now, does this apply to, say if you, like, our students that just graduated, are they still allowed to go in that summer, or are they not, it has to be their
Yeah, there's
11th
certain grade
year?
level bands that we're opening those trips up to.
Okay.
Yeah. So students right now that are in the middle school will be eligible for some of the trips because they'll be in the high school at the time they run. So we're looking for students that would be in the high school when the trips run.
Okay. So like the graduating class of 2026, it wouldn't apply to the Rome? They wouldn't be able to go to that one?
To the Rome one,
Yes.
did you say?
Yes, to the Rome and Uruguay.
I believe they are. Yeah, I
Oh,
believe
so if
I
they
believe
graduate in June,
yeah.
they can still do that summer?
Correct.
Okay, that's what I was
so
asking.
it would end, but it wouldn't be the kids that were going into like 9th grade. They'd have to be in there.
Okay.
So
Okay.
it would not be any of the kids that are technically in middle school. They have to actually be in the high school or have just finished.
Okay.
Because the trips will run like right after students graduate.
Okay.
It'll still be in June for the most part. Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Okay.
Steel standards.
I brought handouts.
Thanks for being patient.
I'm a teacher.
Good answer.
That's good.
So just, I'm gonna be able to answer any questions regarding finances regarding all of this, but I asked Mrs. Wilder and then also for the second part, Mrs. Dunham to be here, because they'll be able to talk about the real nuts and bolts and getting down to where we are and the types of decisions we're making.
Sure, so the first handout that I have here for you guys says end of year review, science teacher and special assignment. So I just kind of blocked this out on some of the specifics of what I've done this year and what I've helped to implement. So for curriculum wise, I've created a spreadsheet with the help of Mr. Pine. For K-12 science, streamlining what that looks like for our families. It's still in process of being made, but for the most part, we have a good foundation of what science, units, objectives, standards, all that looks like K-12 for science. The other thing that I've worked hard on in curriculum is changing the sequence of the high school for environmental science course so that we hit those standards and steals. In terms of coaching, I've worked with teachers who might need a little bit more help for student-centered learning. We talked in the beginning of the year about how it's scary to let like kindergartners and first graders go. So we've had conversations about how to do that. And then I presented PD on the steals and science pedagogy best practices. For networking, I was able to attend a couple different workshops as well as the Denver conference to meet a lot of contacts in terms of not just science but instructional coaching as well. And then successfully so far, first grade has done all 3 science days. It's been amazing. I got to see some of them. Tomorrow is actually kindergarten, and second grade also finished theirs. So it's been a great opportunity for them to get some hands-on time with their kids and also spread it throughout their day so they're getting a whole day's worth of science in. Any questions about that? I know I kind of ran.
No, I think it's great. The fact that you're getting to see what's going on and go from there.
Watching second graders try to build stuff with straw was absolutely amazing. Probably my favorite part.
That was my favorite so far too.
Yeah.
Seeing the kids really explore things, man, and they're doing it.
Yes.
I mean, it's
Definitely hands-on, inquiry-based, questions first, answers later. Student-led, not teacher-directed. Teacher-facilitated.
Education.
And then the second handout I have for you is regarding Mystery Science and then the Miller and Levine curriculum resources that we have. So Mystery Science would be our Peters and Slatington resources. Currently, Peters doesn't have Mystery Science, but we're looking to purchase the online access and mystery kits, probably in stages, obviously, to offset some costs of things, but it's in the works to get those materials to teachers to do those hands-on activities with consumables. And then Slatington has the online access currently. They need the kits as well. I know back in the beginning, I believe it was you who said this requires money. So we're talking about those consumables again, making sure that in stages we get those consumables to teachers. And then for Miller and Levine, we demoed the bio pilot this year. I can personally say, teaching the first half of the course this semester, that it's an absolutely phenomenal resource in terms of phenomena-based learning and reaching those NGSS standards. There's a lot of opportunities for teachers to pull from without having to do extra legwork, which makes this transition that much easier for people who might not be so comfortable with less teacher direct lessons. There's assessment variety, which I love as well. Science is very project-based. Obviously, we have to teach our kids those testing skills for things like the keystones, but those skills of doing science are also extremely important, as we know with the skills transition. So having the ability to have both of those types of assessments available is super, super helpful. And then with the environmental science course next year, we're expected to bring that text in for Miller and Levine. It's also NGSS based. For every NGSS standard, there's a steel standard. I kind of use them interchangeably. So we have that to streamline 9th to 10th grade science. Did I hit it?
You did it.
Okay.
Great. That was awesome. So as you can tell from my updates, we talk a lot. I mean, right? So right now, I think we're in a really good position moving forward at the elementary level. We're getting things really, I think, aligned very nicely at the secondary level. I did say I would talk about money, so I think we're in good shape with Mystery Science. We're going to take that on as curriculum instruction budget for the first year, but then that'll fall into the building budget. Mr. Briner has the unfortunate position of having had Mystery Science when he came into the position, so he just still pays for it. As usual. And then next year, we're fortunate enough right now with the way things have worked in the schedule, we don't have Mrs. Wilder in for a block for both semesters, but we do have her for one in the beginning of the year out of a teaching assignment to continue to work with us at closing the gap in grades 6 through 8. And so I think that's going to be very helpful. And then, I mean, I think we'll be very well articulated across, and also to facilitate and help with some of the meetings through the Lunch and Learn and help sort of facilitate that from the science end of things. So did I hit it?
I think so.
Okay, there we go. All right, so any questions about science? Oh yeah, so Mystery Science. So right now we're working out, hopefully it'll come out to less than expected. Or the same. Let's put it that way. So right now I'm working with the IU with Eric Leck, and I actually just shot you, Mr. Briner, a message there to ask what your latest quote was, because last year I came in like a hot shot, and I was like, hey, did you get a price like this? And he was like, yeah, $200 less. So he actually got a better price than me last year, so we went with that. So we're going to work that out, but it will come out at it's about $1,700 right now is the expected cost to come in. But if Mr. Briner got a lower price, then we're going to fight for that for Peters as well. I think last year it was $1,500, but Mystery Science was purchased by Discovery Education, so there's been a little bit of a change there in the pricing.
The extra money's now going to Mr. Hauser after today's conversation.
And then for the Miller Levine piece, we did plan out for a full year of bio or bio and ecology course, both to be using the same text. So we anticipated having to buy 120 to 130 seats for that, either in block scheduling or now that we've switched to the ecology text, which is cheaper by about $15 a text. We're also likely to come in under what we originally anticipated for that, which sounds like a big number at first because it's digital licensing over 6 years. It's probably it was 23,000 when I talked about it in September. It's gonna probably come in around 21,000. And again, that's broken up over the time, first year absorbed by curriculum instruction and subsequent years within the high school building budget. So we haven't talked about these in a while. I put them in some of the recent board updates, but we haven't talked about them since, well, I'd say October was the last meeting that we talked about Miller Levine and the pilot that we were doing, so.
If I could just add one more thing about Mystery Science, one of the reasons that we did decide to go with this is because teachers have already been using it at Slatington. So the addition of the consumables with things they've already been doing and then having those teachers that are already comfortable doing it, helping those other teachers there is definitely a plus. And again, all NGSS skills-based science skills.
Yeah, it certainly was a plus. We had an easy sell at Slatington, and I have to say, whether it was supposed to be an easy sell or not, the Peters teachers have been absolutely amazing. They love this. They absolutely have loved all the things that we've loved, which is seeing the kids really explore. So it's been very, I think, rewarding and positive. So, anything else in science? So I have my name down here, but I'm actually going to ask Mrs. Dunham to talk a little bit about this. So I do have linked in there a quote from Schools AI. This came up, I know we talked throughout the year about AI and then kind of took a break from it, but we are looking to expend some ESSER funding that was associated with tutoring that we didn't expend in other ways throughout the course. We only have until September to do that. Schools AI, I think, offers us an opportunity to use those funds and explore some things, but I'm going to stop talking and I'm going to let Mrs. Dunham talk about that. I will say that Mrs. Dunham's kind of emerged in the area as a teacher leader in terms of AI. She even was nominated and a semi-finalist for Magic Schools AI Teacher of the Year. We are not going with Magic Schools, unfortunately, so that was that. But
I hope they're not watching this.
But,
I'm like,
but if you want to just talk a little about Schools AI, our direction there.
It's been a journey, part of, my position, tech integration, is to stay up with what's the latest, and artificial intelligence is certainly on the forefront. It's a huge research interest of mine and our department. Mrs. Wilder uses it often, Mr. Pine. But in general, it's been difficult because there's so many teacher-specific tools out there beyond ChatGPT that are specifically designed for teachers, and teachers are at the center. And so I've been working with companies and evaluating. And School AI is by far the best investment, I think, for our students. One, because FERPA and COPA policies, it's at the forefront for safety and student privacy. They have been ahead of the game. Their engineers are fantastic. With School AI, we would have access to the latest models for AI. And I think the best part about School AI is that it helps threefold. It helps teachers, one, with developing curriculum, two, having like a thought partner, because there's a component where they can actually consult and seek advice and kind of have that piece. And they also, School AI is very student-centric as well. So all night I've been here listening, and I've been hearing what are we doing about our EL students? How are we differentiating for our students? We're talking about we need a third of a person or a half of a person. When I'm hearing all these conversations, I'm like, we do need staff, but we also can leverage technology to help fill those gaps. And School AI, actually, one of what I think is special is the way it addresses tutoring specifically, because the funding this does come from tutoring. Its ability to individually meet the needs of every student, specifically our EL students, is off the charts. I have a few stories I can share. I know it's late. I could talk about it in much greater depth another time, but I will say I have had the honor of working with teachers with it. with our EL students in particular. I was in Mrs. Mariana's class just last week, and we had a student who's from Yemen, and he could not do the Pythagorean theorem simply because of the language barrier. And instead of just translating, we wanted him to learn. And there is a difference. We can hand translations all day long, but our students learning? And our EL students are dealing with barriers of language while also trying to learn content. And he was, I got to witness him actually practice and show his knowledge of that content. It was incredible. So we assigned him an individual tutor just for him. And by purchasing School AI, those EL students will have their own tutor 24/7, not just when a teacher starts it, but they'll have a companion with them at all times. So there's a lot more information I can share, but I know it's late, and I appreciate the best being saved for last, but I'm happy to talk about it in more depth if you have any questions. Thank you.
You were just talking about science. I'm assuming this is not only for science, this is across the curriculum.
No, this is,
I'm
yeah.
sorry for the poor transitioning. My department
No,
has its fingers in a few different areas. So yeah,
Scott, don't worry about it.
this is more global than that, yes.
Yeah, we actually, just so you're all aware, Slatington middle school and high school teachers have already been trained on this with me, and a lot of them have taken interest on their own time. We obviously haven't dealt with the student piece just yet because we're trying to be mindful and cognizant of safety, and we want to do AI responsibly with our students. We spend a lot of time considering policies and things like that, but the potential is, honestly, it's mind-blowing, and I'm really excited to be on the forefront of that. So.
I'd love to hear more, maybe we can.
Oh no, I know it's late, and I'd love to chat, and anything you'd like me to share with you, I'm happy to write a narrative. I'm happy to show you some videos, some cool things that we've done over the year. But it's been incredible. In fact, your daughter loves AI. I know that.
It's awful. I'm so sorry.
Oh.
I love it, and I have very little
Mixed
use
feelings.
and knowledge and mixed feelings about it because at work we're not technically allowed to use it.
Right.
Because of proprietary information, customer information, those types of things.
Yeah.
So school district's much different. I get that. So I'm not dabbling in it quite as much as you guys. My question would be, so the horror stories of ChatGPT.
Yep.
And then I'm not sure what the difference is, and sorry to ask this dumb question. School AI versus ChatGPT, and if a student would use this, I've seen ChatGPT literally write them a paper.
So I'm a former
Will
English
this
teacher,
do that? And if it does, how do we allow our teachers to know that that paper was written by AI and not written by our student?
So again, if we have time, and I can do it another time, I can actually log in and show you. But the best part about School AI is the transparency, because the teachers would have all those conversations. They can see it in live time. They can go back. So we're able to see that. So that's one. As a former English teacher, did it terrify me the first time I saw it? I'm like, oh my gosh, and they can write a TDA in minutes. Yes, but what I love about School AI is whatever the teacher prompts it to do, like students can't do what they want with it. There are parameters that are set by the teacher, and that's the difference. I hate to talk about the competitor Magic School, but Magic School, it doesn't, I don't know how to say this, but if the student says, well, okay, instead of giving me feedback, could you write the essay? I'll just follow it. But School AI is very learning centric and has like these parameters. And I've tested that. I've tested all these tools. I probably worked with, 50 or 60 companies. I lost count, but like, it's definitely designed with the learner in mind and learning. So, and I'm happy to show you it. I'm happy to log in at some point. We can do a little demo.
Are there any drawbacks?
Drawbacks to this company?
Or the
AI.
students using AI?
Well, I think we have to be responsible, right? I mean, I think we need to make sure that they're not, using it to cheat. Like, I know there's academic dishonesty, but we already have that as it is. We have students that use photo math and take pictures of math problems, and it breaks up all. I mean, that's already existed. But in my opinion, like, that's not going to go away. I think if we show them how to use it responsibly, it'll actually help them, because my true belief is students only cheat because they are intimidated by what they're doing. But I feel like if they actually know the content, they won't feel tempted to cheat. I'm not saying that's gonna eliminate all of it, but I don't think that should be at the forefront. But obviously, you know, in our student handbooks and things like that, we'll have to address that. But I think the nice thing about School AI is that we can see how it's being used and teachers can monitor that, and we can block other things, and this could be the only thing that they do use. And I also think it comes down to training of teachers and showing them how to use it well and how to accomplish their learning goals.
Let's face it, if students are gonna cheat, they're gonna cheat. You could buy a paper online right now,
Yeah.
if you wanna buy one.
Yeah.
So, in any subject matter you want, page length, whatever. So, it's just another great tool. And I like the fact that you said that we use technology to close some of the gaps, you know, with not just EL, but maybe even special ed.
Yes, and again, it is a tutoring tool, and that's what the funds are for, and I can absolutely see it for that. It can also be used for enrichment. I've been doing little experiments, and it's honestly been really successful. And it's up to the teacher. The teacher needs to know how to ask the right questions so that the students can get there.
How's that training gonna get done? The teacher training, how's that gonna occur?
You're looking at it. But I do run committee, and again, we have been thinking about this proactively. At Slatington, I spent 3 hours, thank you, Mr. Brenner, with his staff. At the high school, I've done 2. At the middle school, I had 2 hours, I think. I've been at faculty meetings, things like that. I've met with teachers individually. We've worked through problems. A lot of new teachers actually like it too because it kind of gives them a structure and a thought partner. And it's incredible the things we've done, and I'm excited to see what's coming next. And there's new features that I'm excited about as well. But I think it will help EL students and all of our students in general.
Thanks.
And just
Any other
follow-
questions?
Oh, sorry.
Oh, go ahead.
No, just follow up. So that we are also within this package, there's professional development for our staff just for starting up, but then there's also 2 sessions for a training trainer. So that would follow up and sort of help Ms. Dunham in what she's going to end up needing to pull forward for the teachers as well. So to answer your question, Ms. Cole, so the answer is yes. Almost definitely there are downsides, right? And if I ever say anything otherwise, be very suspicious, but not nearly the downsides of ignoring this, right? So at the end of the day, I mean, I think that we really do have to get in front of this, and this is a very safe, contained way for us to engage with our students about it and remove some of the temptation for some of the more, I use the word nefarious, well, it's so dramatic. I wish I could come up with a less dramatic word right now. But the more negative, right, ways that they could be using this to cheat, right, to really kind of put something in front of them that does the scaffolding piece, right, and jump right to the answer piece. So, yeah, it will keep an eye on those. So being aware that there are potential downsides, there are things that we have to keep an eye on as second order effects. So.
Thank you.
Sorry.
So I think I'm hearing support for this to move forward based on the quote there, spread out over, how many years is that?
So we'd be paying it all up front because we're paying it out of ESSER funds, but it is a 3-year agreement. So it would give us 3 years of service through them. And then at that point, honestly, the nice thing about that is who knows what's going to happen with this environment over time. I like them because I think they're going to stay on top of things, but who knows? I mean, this environment, it could shift over the next 3 years and we'll look for a better provider who provides us a better source for our students.
You said the cost is of what?
So the cost is, so there's a lot of discounts in the quote. $10,480 is the actual quote, yeah.
For 3 years.
For 3 years.
And we do have some money left in our ESSER funds that have to be used up by this summer, and we have money left over. We were doing a lot of tutoring at the middle school, high school, but we did not use all of those funds, so we have a good pool of money left over to use towards this.
Yeah, I told the vendor, I said I needed it at $10,400, and so like he just started cutting off like fees and stuff like that. So we still have it for 700 students, which is our original plan, but we've got it for $10,480. I said I'll open up a lemonade stand, I'll come up with the other 80 if everyone, needs me to, but I think, yeah.
Everybody okay with that?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Okay. Anything else for Education Committee? And we will close that. And I think
Policy?
go to policy. 1,700 policies.
Not fair, folks, not fair.
Is this
Way to
gonna
go.
be a sleepover?
Dr. Stoker, I'll just turn it over.
So, there was an ordinance that was passed in Lehigh County on February 14th of this year, and it goes into effect June 1st of this year, so immediately. And we have to update several policies, all with respect to the same areas, to keep up with that ordinance that was recently passed. So all of these policies are essentially being updated in the similar ways due to that ordinance. So I will run through those. So the first one is policy 004.1. This is our student representatives to the board. This policy, under the new ordinance, citizenship is a protected class, so we had to remove that from this. So it says the principal will have the right to reject a candidate for reasons of citizenship or academic standing. We cannot reject a student from being a board representative for citizenship. So that's something that we had to remove. That's it for that policy, so these will go quick. Okay, the next policy is policy 103, discrimination affecting students. This policy again had to be updated for similar reasons. Bless you. Under the ordinance, we had the anti-discrimination basis were added, and we had some other changes that were in here, so I'll point to those. This one again, citizenship status, height, weight, domestic or sexual violence victim status. Those are the areas that we had to add to this policy based upon the new ordinance. Okay, the next policy is policy, oops, I did that one already. So we are on policy 104. Again, similar. This one is now discrimination, Title IX, sexual harassment affecting staff. So again, we had to update this one, has to do with sources of income, height, weight, domestic or sexual violence, victim status. This one also includes veteran status. We can't discriminate for veteran status, which obviously would not be in the student policy because they are not at that point veterans. And also GED as opposed to a high school diploma. So if someone has earned a GED versus having like a Northern Lehigh or any high school diploma, we can't discriminate on that basis. A little bit further down, you'll see those repeated under the discrimination definition. We'll leave one more time. So reports of discrimination as well. So same thing, in that case, we have 3 different areas that were updated. Policy 302. This one is employment of the superintendent or assistant superintendent. So in this one, when hiring, we cannot look at prospective hires' criminal history until after we have offered them an initial interview under the ordinance. So we can still make a determination as to whether we want to hire them based upon if we find out they have a criminal history, if we find out that references aren't good, things of that nature. But we can't, we have to offer them an initial interview if they're somebody we find as a qualified candidate. Then later we can make that determination as to whether or not we want to hire them. While we were updating this, we also added in the additional forms that we require as a district. So criminal history, child abuse, FBI, our 168 form. We added all of those in, and that the costs would be at the responsibility of the candidate. So we had the opportunity to update that area as well. The next policy is 304. This is employment of district staff. So very similar to superintendent and assistant superintendent, this now applies to employment of all staff. So again, they're not required to disclose their criminal history until after an initial interview is offered, and then again, we can make determinations at that point. We also took that opportunity to add in the other background checks that we do, and that the cost would be at the district staff's responsibility. 305. This is district employment of substitutes. Again, similar to the ones that we've just talked about. Prospective hires are not required to disclose their criminal history until after an initial interview is offered. So same language in that one as well. Okay. Any questions on all of those policies related to the ordinance?
Policy 305 doesn't state specifically that the person has to pay for their clearance, where the others do. Is there a reason for that you know?
There isn't. We can add that in there.
It just seems strange that all
Yep.
the others, it specifically stated that, and then this one it didn't mention it, so that's no big deal, but.
Yep, we can add that. Good catch.
Okay.
Actually, you know what? I think it does. It may be in a little bit of a different section. Let me just pull it back up again.
I think maybe in your talking.
In your talking
notes
points,
on
it's
on
not
that
there.
Oh,
page.
okay. I'll add it there.
Yeah.
Alright,
I'm
we'll
doing
do.
it
It's
now.
not on our sheet, but.
Yeah, I just added it in, Dr. Sue.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Alright, do we have the permission from the board members present to move all of those policies related to the ordinance for a first reading for Monday night? Okay, thank you. The last policy that we have on here is a little bit different from all of those. As we just talked, oh, I skipped one, I'm sorry. I skipped the free and reduced meals one. But- So again, this one is, again, non-discrimination. So this is citizenship status, height, weight, domestic or sexual violence, victim status. It just says that we can't discriminate for free and reduced prices of meals or any of our programs, any of our food service programs. So we just had to add in these categories again. Apologize, I missed that one. So are we okay with putting that one with that same group? Okay. So then the last policy on here is a bit different. This one is an AI policy. So we've talked a little bit in the education committee this evening about AI. As we talked about wanting to get ahead of things. We want to make sure that what we decide to do with faculty, what we decide to do with students as far as using AI, that there's some umbrella guidelines related to that. So right now what we have is policy E15 is our acceptable use of internet computers and network resources. That's our umbrella policy. And then we have some other policies that we use, like we've created a social media policy. As technology continues to evolve, there are other sub-policies that kind of get put under that umbrella of acceptable use. So AI is one of those policies that actually Mr. Pine and Ms. Dunham were starting to develop one. We had some other districts that were starting to develop one. We were starting to say, okay, what are we gonna have in this policy? It became kind of ubiquitous that was happening. And so what happened at that point is PSBA put out a sample policy. And then very quickly thereafter, King's Fry, as part of the EdTech, the Tech Pool Consortium, also put out an AI policy. So we looked at PSBA's policy and our admin team met and we discussed that, you know, are there things we feel that are missing here? Are there things that we want to accentuate within this? There were some things also within that policy that were required and some things that were up to our discretion as whether or not we were going to include them. So we built that policy as an admin team, and then we also looked at the Tech Pool Council one to see if there was anything missing from that, and whether that was in somewhat of a different order, but it included all of the same features. So there wasn't anything that really needed to be added beyond the policy that we got from PSBA. So if you look at the bullet points, and I won't read through all of these just for purposes of keeping the evening shorter. It focuses on the following 7 guiding principles from Teach AI. So it talks about all of the things that we would need to have in a policy. Also includes guidelines for AI literacy and staff for students, ethical considerations, technology protection measures, academic integrity, which we've talked about this evening, AI-generated content verification, evaluation and monitoring, consequences for inappropriate use. So those are all of the things that we've kind of talked about when we are talking about students and staff using AI. So again, this policy is brand new, so everything you'll see in here is, you're not going to see any edits or anything like that because this is how the policy was developed. But this should help us give us a little bit more of a guideline for us to start implementing and training staff and students to use these tools within the educational setting. Does anybody have any questions about this?
I have one basic question. How is it that the county commissioners now are allowed to promote a policy that tells the school districts what they have to do? It's bad enough we have the state and the federal government and every other organization out there. Now the county commissioners where do they get the right to do that?
That's above my pay grade.
I agree with that.
All I know is, so what they passed is essentially applies to Lehigh County. King Spry gave us some direction as to how they felt we should update our policies based upon that passing. Outside of that,
They're going to send us a check for the money we spent to get it right. I give up. Sorry.
And also the majority of the commissioners are from Allentown School District.
Correct.
Many problems that relate to this whole thing.
Yes.
So put that in perspective.
That's true.
I do think that they are good protections for our children and staff. I think they are common sense, whether they are legislative or not. So I do support them, and I also recommend that we follow the advice of our solicitor to avoid any sort of legal liability.
I agree.
I wasn't suggesting we don't approve them. We've gone this far. I was just wondering, who else is going to tell us what to do? That's all. But I agree with you. I agree with their common sense and
They're good, but it's just how they came about is the issue.
okay. With regard to the AI policy, do we have the permission of the board members present to move that for a first reading on Monday evening as written? Okay, thank you very much.
Any other items for policy? I'll close policy and turn it to community relations, maybe? Is that what's next?
Yes, I will open up the community relations page.
It's in there somewhere. There it is.
The last page.
Thank you, Mrs. Williams. And I'm actually going to turn over the graduation 2024 kind of updates to Mr. Stroll. I know many of you were able to participate some of these ceremonies on here. If you could just kind of give us a summative report.
Sure, thank you, Dr. Link. So we continued our tradition of the parade of graduates where our seniors parade around each of the schools. We actually get transportation out to Peters, Slatington, and then we parade around the middle school and the high school. I think it's a great way to inspire some of our young pups. We've got the band that leads us and Bruiser, our bulldog, who leads us around, and they get really, really excited about it. So it's a great way to have our seniors interact with their former teachers as well, and their former teachers celebrate them. So it's great to see. Thank you, Mr. Briner, Mr. Schneiderite, and Mr. Hauser for allowing us to parade around your school third year in a row. Graduation ceremony, I think it went off without a hitch. I mean, it was amazing. The weather cooperated. Thank you to all of you who helped out and participated and attended. That was on Friday. The only I thought I was getting attacked by some bees at one point. There was a drone that was over our heads a couple of times, but other than that, I think we had a wonderful night. We had about 99 students walk at the celebration. More graduated, but those about 99 celebrated. So it was great to see family and friends and parents and guardians. So yeah.
Question.
Yeah.
Because we talked about that graduation. Does somebody have to have permission to fly a drone over a public stadium like that?
No permission was given and no permission was requested. We were as equally surprised.
Well, aren't they supposed to though? Isn't that part of the
And the whole ceremony is for sale now.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
So,
Not a surprise.
yeah. So I was not going to stop the ceremony because of that.
No.
Because that would be more of a disruption. But yes, we're very well aware that the drone was there, and I can assure you that no permission was asked and no permission was given.
We were talking about that.
Yeah.
I thought they had a.
I mean, it's someone who's been doing drone of everything in the community, which is a nice thing. He takes pictures and he shows images and stuff, but it was a little bit like kind of, you know, they really needed permission to be there.
How would you stop that? Like, how would you, like, next year you have graduation, now you got 10 drones flying around the stadium. Do you?
Shoot them
I
down.
Yeah, that's right. I thought it was the school district doing
I'll bring my
it.
shotgun.
There's only one
So
sound
we'll
that makes
have, we'll have
that.
a plan in place for next year. I will say right now, I cannot guarantee you that somebody standing on the edge of the property is not gonna fly a drone over. At that point, I have to make a decision as to whether we're gonna shut down the biggest ceremony of the year or not because of that. So there's no guarantees for that. But what I can say is put, you know, messaging out to the media on our websites that drones are not permitted. If it occurs, then we'll have to have a contingency plan in place with our law enforcement. But part of the problem is, and we've been at sporting events like this, you don't necessarily know who's flying it or where they're at.
Right.
So,
And because it's so close to the airport too, isn't there other guidelines that come out beyond the
I don't have
school
any-
district thing, you know, the
I don't know the
MMA?
answer to that.
You know, I thought there, let me put it this way, I thought there was.
We also hosted the class of 1974. Typically, we honor the 50-year reunion. They started off with having a tour at Slatington High School, which is now the middle school, with Mr. Hauser. They were then bussed over to the high school where they had some light refreshments and then shuttled down to their seats at the stadium. And you know, we got to mingle with them, and it was great to see some Slatington Bulldogs.
Third year in a row for the 50-year class to come and tour the former Slatington High School, the last building to bear that name. Told some great stories. We had a whole lot of laughs, and it's always nice to see the reaction when they see what the building looks like.
Looked
now.
like a good turnout
So,
too.
Yes. Yes, we had about 20 with this class, and in years prior, it's fluctuated between 20 and 40. So always fun.
Okay, just keep that up. I only had 12 more years. I'll be there.
Sounds good. I did have some helpers from National Junior Honor Society with that tour, give kind of the students' perspective of that, which was fun. And if Mr. Stroll is finished, that leads me into the last bullet point here. Middle School Awards Night was held on the 31st of May. We had an incredible ceremony. Mr. Carroll and the jazz band provided some pregame entertainment for us. Mrs. Frank had the lobby and some adjoining hallways all decorated for our annual art show as well. We had several community partners present awards for citizenship and student leadership. We acknowledged students for participation in extracurriculars and also for thriving academically. And we inducted 30 students into National Junior Honor Society. It was a very excellent event.
So the high school had a similar program for the seniors on May 22nd, I think in my graduation speech. Our seniors earned about $154,000 in scholarships in total. So, you know, thanks to the contributions of of those organizations to donate to our students, that helps them, you know, be successful in their futures. So thank you.
How does that compare to other years?
$9,000 more than last year, and then the previous year was about $4,000 more than that.
Okay. Great. That's close, yeah, but
That's great.
Yeah, it's been going up the past 3
right
years.
direction.
Yeah.
Gentlemen, can you email me your walking notes so I can put it to the committee notes?
Okay. Any more questions? All right. I'm gonna close the meeting. Time to go home.
Yeah.
Thank you, everyone.